here we are.
Hey, it's like we
Sticking
never
the
left.
landing.
Gotta say, by the way, I appreciate that picture. That is such a likeness.
It's one of my shout outs, actually. My daughter is super enthused that I actually do YouTubing.
Oh, good.
It's
Yeah.
better
I think
than
that makes you like the
It's
coolest
like
dad in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Like the other dads aren't doing that.
Right.
So I said, do you want to do this picture? If you see it, or if you draw it, it's possibly seen by tens of thousands of people. And she was like super ecstatic. So. And she likes doing all the art. I like her art. So
possibly might be doing a little bit of work in that sense.
Yeah.
No, I think it's spot on. It's spot on, especially the added teapot. Drinking straight out of a teapot, though, that's dangerous.
With your mechanical arm.
I would recommend it. With my mechanical arm, of course. I forgot about that. Is that the scene from Army of Darkness when he tries to get the guy out of him? He just drinks like a whole load of like hot tea out of a kettle.
She hasn't seen it yet, but maybe my essence.
She must be about the age to watch Army of Darkness.
Yeah. 11. That's good. Yeah.
I mean, I watched American Werewolf in London when I was 4. Never gave me nightmares.
Yeah. I showed my kid. He was like 12, 13. We'd been watching various movies, and I asked him like, "Oh, do you want to watch like a scary movie?" Because we had to watch like Aliens and stuff. He did okay with that, and he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "All right." So we're watching Carpenter's The Thing, and he just like was not phased at all. Like that movie scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. He was just like, "Oh, okay, that was pretty cool." Like, yeah, okay.
It's a new breed of kids that we're breeding this day and age because of the alien invasion that's inevitable that has to deal with such horrors. We'll panic and we'll falter, but they'll just be like,
"Yeah, it was like whatever."
I've killed those in Helldivers. It's fine. Okay, cool. Crack on.
Okay, so first of all, did everyone bring their Jaffa Cakes?
I am straight out. I was just bemoaning that I had to pay $10 for a box of those fuckers.
I brought some cookies, but I kind of ate them before I went live. Sorry. And some Oreos. I left them at Jugs when I was talking to Louise and Rob. So double cream Oreos as well.
That's some serious stuff. That's like a commitment. So you got to set some time aside.
But no, just tea, no Jaffas. Yeah. Sorry. Do you know why they're called cakes, by the way? Do you know why they're called cakes?
Something about the import or taxation laws.
Yeah. So, because so many people get angry about it. It's like, it's not a cake, it's not a biscuit, it's not a cake. It's like, no. You've obviously got nothing in life to worry about.
Yeah, it's like getting to be a religious question. People get opinions.
They do. They're strong ones. I've discovered that being on the YouTubes now.
Yeah. Well, do you want to? Not that I think you need any introduction to the nerds that watch, but just in case they do, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
I can. My name is Peachy. I thought this was Alcoholics Anonymous. Apparently, it's not. It's two guys talking about hobbies. So, yes, I have a YouTube channel. I used to work for Workshop for many years, longer than I care to remember. Actually, I had hair when I started, and I was young. This is what working for Workshop does to you. But no, recently I've got my own channel now, and I usually do like lots of talky head stuff about products I like, new games. This is where I discovered Ivan's games because people reached out and were like, you want to try these games? I'm like, these sound mega. Do some battle reports, do some painty stuff, and I have a podcast with Louise Sugden and Rob, the Honest Wargamer, and we just have fun. And we're all neurodivergent, and we never keep on subject when we're doing our podcast. It's very hard.
We were on subject once, but I don't think we liked it very much.
No, it's weird. Isn't it? Don't feel
uncomfortable feeling. Yeah, I don't think that's not for us.
Good.
Well, we're glad to have you on. We're going to have a chat about some things.
I just have to do one thing before we continue because I keep forgetting. I just need to thank Matthew of Bedroom Battlefields for hosting our podcast. So we take the live streams and we put them up to podcasts so people can listen to it because they hate YouTube, I guess.
Is that your shout out?
Some people hate.
I think
YouTube,
a lot of people treat YouTube as a podcast anyway. Like they just have it on their like 7th monitor while they're doing stuff.
Yeah, but I really appreciate the work because I don't know how to do any of it. So the RSS feeds. I mean, I guess I could figure out how to upload to Apple, but aside from that, I don't know what's going on.
We kind of have an excess of enthusiasm and a deficit of technical skill.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you want to hear a really boring fact?
Yes.
really boring fact. So someone just dropped a message. Rolando, a Kit Kat is a wafer, not a biscuit. It's a confectionery. I discovered recently, right, a documentary. It's a very boring English documentary, but it just got Kit Kats came about, right, because the working man in the olden days when everything was black and white, right, Roundtree, who originally had their factories and stuff, were making like really expensive confectionery for the rich during the Victorian period, and there was like a question and answers thing where they could, like, the workers could put like suggestions and stuff, and one of them was like, what about a confectionery bar for the working class that will fit into a lunchbox? And what Roundtree's did was like, so Kit Kats were made from all the offshoots and all the offcasts from all the products they were making around that time. So they'd literally get all the offcasts that were like on the sides and stuff like that, and then turn it into an actual biscuit wafer thing. And I was like, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
that's how Kit Kats came about. It was just, here's all the crap we didn't want. Have it.
The original ones were like huge. You had like chocolate bars that are way too big for the rich, the fat cats. Get the
fat cats. Yeah, they had really expensive.
See, I've never thought of Kit Kats being like a revolutionary experience, but now I have a whole new appreciation for it. We were pretty excited the other week because we went to a Asian food place here, and they had some of those like import Kit Kats where they get all the good shit. They get like the strawberry Kit Kats,
yes,
and, like a bunch of those stuff. They didn't have the really weird ones because they're probably like you have to be
matcha
Japanese.
tea.
Yeah, like squid Kit Kat or whatever.
Squid Kit.
I mean,
you know what the most amazing thing is? Each one of us eats a Kit Kat that tastes different from the others.
That is true.
Even if it's the same wrapping, looks like the same bar, will taste completely different.
Really?
Yeah, Canadian's different from American, which is different from British. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think the Canadians is like half cocoa, and the Americans ones are just like sawdust and despair. That's make them out of. There are many good food products in America, but chocolate is typically not one of them, unless you get like really expensive stuff. And Kit Kat's doing that. Yeah,
love it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna check up on the chat here 1 sec, and then we're gonna move on to a game.
Oh, a game! I love games. I want to do my Gollum impression. I did that. Games.
I just recently discovered how to make the chat pop up, so I'm gonna use that. Here I am.
Getting the
meet unexpectedly. Ooh. So Technoskull, good to see you. And Roland, we shouted you already. What does he got to say? Okay, this is a. Have you ever chased newbie out of the shop with a broom handle?
No.
No, never has.
I mean, I've chased a not a tramp, but some very violent man out of the shop once, but that was it.
Well, you might have chased newbie out of the shop then.
Oh, okay. I'll take that. I'll take it.
Noised is here. Noised is our theme song. So the music I played in the beginning was by Noised. That's great.
Also,
he's our Italian stallion.
The coolest man in Italy, and by
coolest man in Italy.
Yeah.
I thought that was the Pope. Now I know who it is.
No, Noose is like proof that you can be a nerd and cool. It's just most of us fails.
Alpha Wolf 299 is sorry they're late. No worries.
Oh, it's fine. You won't get told off.
Basically on time. But you do have to stand in front of the whole class and apologize. do the little song.
And unsurprisingly, Noise learned how to paint from Duncan and Peachy. Like, I think, 80% of people now in the hobby.
Yeah, that's got to be a pretty sizable...
Us, the other 20% had to learn from the army books from the 90s.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Here's step 1 and step 3.
Yeah, it's always like step 1 is undercoat the mini. Step 3 is like a fully shaded model.
Yeah.
You can never do. And
1, 2, 3 heavy metal, we used to call it.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. This looks like shit, but I can make the base green. That looks good.
It's quite a skip, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to appreciate how much especially for painting, the internet has really done, because just being able to see. Like, I remember we went to, they had these tournaments in Denmark called Fanatic, and occasionally they would have I remember we had like Gavin Thorpe come over one year. They would have guests come over, and a couple of times they would have what was his name? Torben Snore, I think was his name. He was like a Danish heavy metal painter at the time. So getting to see him do this stuff, because he would put on like little classes and stuff, and it was just such a revelation of seeing somebody who was like good at it. Like you can read all the techniques, but like that doesn't really teach you how to do something like painting unless you're I guess like literate. That was my
Yeah, it's always they always struggled as books as well, because we used to do like, well, probably 2016, 2015, we did a bunch of books and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they never sold.
Yeah,
because it's I mean, that's the great thing about visual stuff like YouTube and like video. You can show the technique in action, whereas like trying to show someone dry brushing in a still image and then words to describe the action is just a bit much, really, for people.
Yeah, dry brushing is actually one thing that I never like understood when I was a kid, because like in part, like we were reading in English, obviously, but yeah, it was hard to. But it's one of those things. The moment you see it done, you know, it's like perfectly obvious. Like trying to imagine how you explain like slap chop or any of that shit to like people purely in text, you know.
My favorite story of dry brushing was my brother, my oldest brother. He was really into D&D at the time, and he used to frequent Games Workshop, and there used to be a shop in our local town, city. It's called a city. It's not really a city, it's a town. It's just got a cathedral, so it classes as a city, apparently. And there was a shop there called Amazing that used to do lots of lead miniatures, like Ralph Hoffman, Marauder stuff, but Games Workshop was there, and he went there, and one day he came back. We were painting, I think, the Hero Quest set really badly. I'll add, really badly. But my brother was painting the Barbarian because that was his favorite character, and my older brother Mark was like, "Oh, I learned dry brushing today at Games Workshop. I'm going to share how dry brushing works." He performed the technique amazingly. He showed us how to put paint on the brush and wipe it off, then rub it over a miniature, and then it picks up the raised details and stuff like that. The only thing was he didn't quite understand the concept of it, and he used black on skin, right? So it ended up like some kind of Looney Tunes moment when the bomb exploded and the guy's just covered in like black dust, and like both me and my brother were like, my middle brother were like, "This looks rubbish." So he got the technique right. It was just the execution.
There was one more step.
All right, so yeah, we got Baron Hambutt here. He is the main inspiration of Jaffa Cakes.
Yeah, I think he's like, I think he probably like owns stock in the company because he's been singing their praises pretty regularly.
Alpha Wolf is wondering if we do have a topic.
We do.
Yeah, a couple topics that are very related to each other.
It's really just one topic.
A big question for Peachy: how many podcasts do you appear on regularly?
I mean, people reach out and say, "Do you want to come on a podcast?" And I'm like, sure, yeah. I mean, you guys reached out. I do feel bad because like this month has been mental, and last month, but you dropped me a message over the weekend. I was like, oh my god, I'd forgotten. I'm really sorry, but I had the evening free. Not booked anything in, but I was just like, how did I forget that? And Mrs. Peaches, you need to be better at organising your calendar. I was like, I thought I had, but yeah, I mean, I pop on the odd one here and there because I mean, obviously, there's the regular one I'm on with Louise and Rob, which is our kind of podcast, but yeah, whenever I can, I'm like talking to people, and also, you know, discovering faces to names as well, because you get a lot of names on like social media and stuff like that, and you talk to them quite regularly, but you don't always see their face. I mean,
do you ever do the thing where you start just associating them with their little like avatar or something like this?
Yes,
looks like a raccoon or something.
I mean, you just look like a 5 parsecs book to me for most of my life. Well, the last year.
Sometimes I get actor association. Like I swear, Ed from Life After the Cover Save sounds exactly like John C. Reilly. So even though they look completely different, I've seen what Ed actually looks like. In my mind, he's always John C. Reilly.
Yeah. There's a guy, I know what he looks like now, but he was the voice actor for Abaddon in like the Heresy video and stuff like that, and he's done like a bunch of stuff for Darktide, but whenever, even though I know what he looks like, I'm always like, I just imagine him as Abaddon. And then I'm like, oh no, Greg, you're just a normal guy, aren't you, with just hair and glasses? You're not Abaddon. Sorry, mate, I thought you were. Oops.
All right, good to see you, MJ. Enjoy the rerun. I always do. Well, not my reruns, other people's reruns. I listen to everything on rerun. I have a huge queue. And I'm going to move on to the game that we're going to play.
Ooh. Oh, okay. I can see it already. I'm terrible at trivia.
This game is Name This Movie.
Ooh.
Uh-oh. Wait, is this naming a movie that does exist or a movie that doesn't? Because I'm better at one of those two.
This is a picture, I think, out of, I don't know, maybe an Osprey Games book or something, and I think it's Swedish soldiers.
Pretty Swedish.
Some gunpowder era. But one looks like Weird Al Yankovic, one looks like Christian Bale.
Yeah.
So what is this movie, and who's it made by? What's it about? Go ahead.
Oh. Well, I've got to tackle the easy part and then stick Peachy with the hard part. So I'm going to say,
great.
I'm going to say that the plot is a romantic comedy set to the backdrop of a grueling war in Scandinavia about a love triangle with a blind woman who also can't hear and therefore has no idea about the two Swedish grenadiers that are vying for her affections.
Brilliant. I love that. So I have to name the movie. It's directed by Rob Snyder, I think.
That's the first name that comes to mind when you say romantic.
And it's called The Swedes. That's it. That's all I've got.
Love it.
But spelt like the vegetable.
Yeah.
The vegetable.
I don't know why. It really. I mean, is this genuine art? Because it does look like Christian Bale. That's insane.
I know.
Yeah.
It's genuine art. MJ probably remembers where this came from.
Oh,
It does look kind of Osprey-like, or like a book of that.
Yeah.
That type.
Yeah, I just saw it on a Discord. It was posted as a reference for something, and someone said, "Wow, that looks like Weird Al Yankovic and Christian Bale." I'm like, nice.
It kind of does.
It also looks like he's got medals on his hat. Like he's put medals on his hat. What's that about?
Sometimes you're just too brave and they won't fit on your chest. You just got Somebody in the chat is saying Prussian Blues. A slapstick comedy about two friends conscripted to the Prussian army in 1871. That's pretty good too.
That is very good. Nice one, Alpha.
I can always hear the soundtrack for that. So that's good.
All right. Perfect. So I think we're ready to move on to the main topic.
I'm going to steal this. That was amazing, by the way. Just random nonsense like that.
Yeah.
You got that a little bit. So our first subject for you folks. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No,
All right, I'll go.
You do the thing. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. I'm not even heavily caffeinated. This is normal item. That's the problem.
So this is just round one. This first round of topics is going to be how the hobby and the internet intersects.
Which is kind of what we were chatting about before we went all cameras on and everything, right? Yeah, so it's an interesting thing, right? Because you're kind of have transitioned worlds, I guess. Because you started in the, I'm just going to say the industry. Everyone likes to say that. What year did you start? I know I should know this because I watched the interview you did.
That's fine. No, I sometimes forget, and I lived it, so don't worry about it. So it was about 2001. So if I remember right, I'm skipping back. I think it was August 2001 because it was the build up ready for Lord of the Rings, the first movie coming out. So that's when I started, and that was in retail.
Everything changed.
And everything changed. Life changed.
You can tell how much of an obnoxious grok somebody is if they're still mad about Lord of the Rings. Ruining White Dwarf.
Oh, really? Because I used to love flipping it around and trying and go. Do you remember when it used to be the opposite?
We were into it, but there was definitely it was the Sigmar of its time for a certain type of
Oh yeah. The classic grognards getting grumpy.
Yeah. It's different. I don't like it.
I don't like change.
But that is kind of this feels mad to say for something that happened in 01, 02, but that is early internet in a way, and a lot of there wasn't really hobby internet, not in the same way that there's now, you had websites and forums, you go on Portents and stuff like that and argue with weirdos. But now it's this whole, just the fact we're sitting, there are multiple YouTubes and podcasts and stuff talking about hobby stuff. And it almost exists on its own.
Yeah.
Alongside, you have a separate community on Board Game Geek, you have a separate community on RPG Net and stuff like that. So what do you've kind of moved from one to the other, or you moved with the stream, or did you set out to when you started doing internet stuff, what was kind of the
it's really interesting because me and Rob have talked about this, a lot of the stuff that we've done, the journey of my, I guess, hobby stroke job has been mostly accidental and by mistake, which is wild. I mean, I always wanted to work for Workshop. I knew that quite early on because I wanted to be an illustrator, and I was doing illustration whilst I was doing the key time stuff and the full time, and a bit full time when I was over summer holidays and stuff. But yeah, when I kind of was in the studios. I suppose even though if I skip back to like being in the stores, you were kind of like certainly when you're a staff member and when you're the manager, you're kind of the hub of the community in that area. So you do become like, it sounds really weird, I hate using the term celebrity, but you are like a very known person within that circle of that niche of a niche. So there is that onus on you to like present yourself in a certain way when you're out and about in the streets, and because you never know who the next customer is going to be or which customer, because you can't remember every customer's face and every customer's name, but when you're out and about, you have to have a certain set of standards, and don't get massively drunk when you go out on a Friday night with your mates. You got to be you have fun, but don't make a prat of yourself. And that kind of like was something that we all learned quite early on, like because me and Duncan were in the same store for a long time. We were very sort of chilled, relaxed, had fun, but we're also very mindful of how we came across. And then we moved into the studios, and I guess the same thing is there, because you become like depending on what projects you're on, you get into White Dwarf. Sometimes you do like your bat report that's shown in there, and then like Warseer and Daka and whatever would have like threads on like this article in White Dwarf, or this article here, or this article there, and there might be on Facebook posts and stuff. So when it moved into YouTube and I started working for Warmer TV, it was just another step on top of that. And it's almost like, you slowly, your sphere of influence, or like who you're talking to, or like the people you've been exposed to, grows with that kind of. So I guess I've been very lucky, because it's almost like you're getting used to the environment, and that environment slightly grows a bit more, and then you get used to that and it slightly grows a bit more. So it was interesting, but I definitely think in the last, certainly running my own channel, that I've seen more than I ever saw before. So like when I was at workshop, there was a lot of comments were disabled, so you never see comments on YouTube videos. You would see some stuff on Facebook, but Facebook at that time was starting to peter up a bit with like engagement and stuff, and I think that might be because they didn't have anyone really managing the Facebook profiles and social media platforms that well at the time anyway. But you'd see like a few dicky comments and this, that and the other. But yeah, from a YouTube point of view, you never really saw any sort of negativity. You'd only know that from at the time when YouTube will have like the thumbs down and the thumbs up. They only show thumbs up now, they never show the thumbs down. But yeah, when I started running my own channel, you're exposed to a lot more. But by that point, I've already toughened up. I would expect the internet to be full of like meanie people. So, but I kind of try to make my channel as positive as possible, and just be about not Slate Games Workshop, because I was there for 20 years, and I was there for 20 years for a reason, because I enjoyed it. It wasn't until like the last year or two that I really stopped enjoying it. And that was, again, I've said many times, it's the manager, not the job. People leave managers, not jobs. And that's obviously would depend on sometimes on the job. If it's like getting a bit too much and you've had enough and you want to chill out a bit more, then sometimes it is the job, but most times it's the manager. And that was the case really for me and Louise and quite a lot of others. So I still love Games Workshop, still love its products, but I kind of found a bit of a niche, and this was accidental as well, because I started doing some paint guides on Workshop and some paint guides on like games that I know and like I'm going to talk about Warcry, I'm going to do this, and then it kind of turned into, oh, Frostgrave, that's pretty good. Oh, 5 Parsecs, that's pretty good. Oh, Silver Bayonet, that's pretty good. So, and then I've now my channel's kind of formed into like, I like looking at new games and talking about them because they're mega, and I like looking at new kits and talking about them. So it's very not Games Workshop centric, which is a bit of a bold move, because most people do non-stop Games Workshop content, but I've kind of like got to the point, and I think this is why it's helped, because I'm not negative about Workshop, but I just show that there's other things you can do, other models you can get.
And that's how to get people like interested in stuff, right? Is show what's cool about it, because otherwise this is something that me and a friend of mine talk about sometimes, that you always get this or that game coming out and they're trying to like unseat Warhammer 40k or something. But if the only selling point is that it's Warhammer 40k with different hats, then people are just going to play Warhammer 40k.
Exactly. And I was a bit sort of like, is this going to work? But it seems to be working. But yeah, it is interesting moving into this role and doing it. But I think I've been prepared enough and learned a lot in the past of like how I go about doing stuff. I mean, I've never
it sounds
fully.
Like you've also learned to have a little bit of distance between it.
Because
I think where people like get themselves into trouble is, and it's difficult. Like I've had times like I can deal with like shitty reviews and stuff now. It doesn't bother me anymore. But I've definitely had moments where, like, you know, you're poking around Board Game Geek or something, you see some motherfucker who's like, oh, there's no like height advantage in 5 leagues. Like, you fucker, it's right there on the page.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can't go like, you know, like you can't go pick a fight with the dude.
No,
you know, you'll just look like a maniac.
Well,
so you have to just kind of like let it go, you know. And
yeah. I mean, I often find that you will get the odd comment that does get you a bit, and you're like, that's a bit unfair, mate. And and I think you've either misinterpreted the entire video or you've not watched it and just commented on like the title. And that's, I mean, that's something that, you know, I'm trying to get my head around as well. Is like you draw people in with the thumbnail is the first thing you try and hook people in with. Then it's the title, then it's the first 15 seconds, and they're the things that really hold people into the videos. And that's why a lot of people do clickbait, and like a lot of Games Workshop hate and stuff, like, because people want it. People love the drama, but I'm like, I don't want to do that, but I also want to make it a bit clickbaity, so people want to click on it, because I want all these cool games and companies to be exposed to people.
I mean, to an extent, you have to play the game like a little bit, because that's
absolutely, and
works, you know?
And every time I have played the game, it's done really well. The videos have, but I do get a lot of the knobheads coming out the woodwork going, like, the Frostgrave one was like, is it better than Warhammer? But I put a massive question mark next to, is it better than Warhammer? It's just like to get people to start watching it. And then it's been one of my most popular video I've ever done, because the audio is rubbish, but because I'm talking about, and I'm still learning at that point as well, but because I'm talking about a game that I've discovered I'm really into, you know, it's done really well, because people are like, oh, this is actually quite interesting. And
I think there's an element. Oh, sorry. I mean,
no,
I think there's an element too of whether it seems like it's authentic or not. Because one thing, I do a lot of hex map like war games, and one thing that is, you can tell a big difference between people who will review a game that they've actually played and they're excited about and they're giving you an overview, versus people who are just like opening the box because they got a free review copy. And there's like no, you know, like I think there's a big, especially with like internet nowadays, it's like super fake in a lot of ways. Like everything is, you know, like marketed to you in some. So finding something that is like kind of authentic and somebody who's like legitimately invested in something, even if like that video had like shitty audio or whatever, I think that like gets people like, oh, okay, this person is like actually interested in this and actually invested in this, and they'll give it a chance, I think.
I do think that does help, actually. And there's been a couple of videos where I've I mean, like even Frostgrave, in that video I say, you know, I've not really played the game that much, but I'm really excited about it. And these are the war bands. I mean, I actually painting war bands that I've finished and showed on imagery in the video. Like, this is my Thermotard warband, this is my Necromancer warband. I still have to and this is how I often work as well. This is my hobby, is I read a set of rules, I really get into the set of rules, usually from a warband creation. That's how Silver Bayonet came about. I was like, oh, that's really cool, I like that. And then I get excited about creating a warband, because that's what hooks me in, is like me painting up the miniatures. And once I paint up the miniatures, then I go and play the game. Some other people do it the other way around. They learn to play the game with like whatever kind of stand-ins they've got or proxies, and they go, this isn't the game for me, I'm not going to invest any time. Whereas I'm an idiot, maybe, I don't know, but I really like making the thing and then like getting excited. And then sometimes the game isn't as good as I was expected to be, but then I still enjoyed the whole process still. So I tend to go through that route a lot when I do my videos.
It's like cutting your own little like corner of the game, right? Like, these are my dudes that I've done.
Yeah,
so now I have like investment in it.
Exactly, but I mean, you know, there's always going to be hate regardless of what you do, or you get like some comments, because they either don't like you, I never have, and I'm never going to change that. But
I mean, some people also just trolling like YouTube for something to shit on.
You know? Exactly. But I mean, I do get it a lot, which is like, you know, you don't do enough Games Workshop stuff, and I'm like, they've got so much money and they've got so many people doing it for them. Can we not look at some of the other companies that do amazing stuff? And this is something that I've become super aware of. And again, I'm going to say it. I love Warhammer. Like, I love Necromunda. I love Warcry, but they have a lot of I wouldn't say dual down, but they have a lot of games that aren't passionate. You like, take your game systems, for instance. You have invested your heart and soul into that, so you've made the best rule system you possibly can, whereas 40k has been written probably 70% complete. It does its job. It's a mechanic to sell all those toy soldiers that they have put their heart and soul into. But
Right,
the heart and soul nowadays doesn't feel like it goes into the rules. It certainly goes into the models and the marketing campaign to make those models get bought by people. But the rules themselves aren't as, and I know this from like talking to like people like James Hewitt, who no longer works for Workshop and he does his own games. He always used to put so much time and passion in his own time into a rule set like Silver Tower or Gore Chosen or the First Necromunda or whatever, because he cares. And that's what's important. And I think a lot of these indie games and like smaller companies with their rule sets, they are putting that time and passion into it. And I'm like, I want to put a light on them because, you know, that's
the one that always stands out to me from, because I started playing Warhammer in the very start of second edition 40K and pretty steadily until we had kind of drifted out with third edition ended. And then after that, I was kind of checking in once in a while. But that was kind of like the heyday for us. But the game that really like blew us away, it was exactly that it felt like something so unique that it had to be like a labor of love, was Gavin Thorpe's Inquisitor. Yes, it was such a strange beast. Like, we barely knew what to do with it. We kind of like invented our own way of playing it because we just it was such an out there thing. And it's just like every single page of that book just screams that this was made because somebody just like they were willing to die to like make this book.
Yeah, I can see that actually now in like the 5 parsec, well, the 5 such and such from wherever. Because to me, when I look at that now, those rules, I'm like, it feels like I'm playing like a Frostgrave or Stargrave warband, but in a sort of Inquisitor stroke Necromunda kind of campaign system. And I know that put the designer notes, the design notes.
Inquisitor.
Yeah. I think that's so good because that's what a lot of people want. So you've just made what people want. But yeah, I mean, I recently did a battle report, which was like, there's so many different game systems I can pick, and it was an old TV show that I'm a fan of from the 80s called V. But I wanted to get that sort of, I guess, storyline, but mix all my favorite action stars from other TV shows or movies at the time. And I've still got more episodes that I've got written that I want to kind of like do, because I want Arnie to turn up, I want John Matrix to turn up, maybe John Matrix and Dutch and Terminator all in the same show. I just don't know. But I was looking through the rules and stuff, and I was like, do I do Stargrave? Do I do 7TV? Have we lost him?
Oh, maybe.
Oh no. No, sorry, we haven't lost him. He's still there. He's still there. But I was like, someone was like, oh, it's really weird take that you've not done 7TV. I was like, well, it's not a solo game because I run these games on my own, and solo mechanics are really good for running these battle reports on my own. So it was like 5 parsecs or Stargrave, and I was like, I don't know, it's your system just felt right for the story thread and like the fast action pace, and I really like the idea of the quick reactions or quick actions dice roll, because with Stargrave it's like you have your captain phase, then you have your what's the second in command called, first mate. You have your first mate phase, then it's the soldier phase, then it's the baddie phase. I'm like, so all the baddies have to go at the end. I don't want that. I want a nice mix between the two, and I kind of like that, like rolling the dice to see who gets to activate first and who are the slow peeps and stuff. And so, you know, there's a game system for everything out there, and that was like perfect for the battle reports I'm running. Whereas Silver Bayonet, I use that for my sharp episodes. But it's
that's perfect.
Yeah, the 5 parsecs, great game system. So I know I'm like just basically saying you're awesome, because you are.
Well, I'll take a little bit. I'm only human. But it's kind of funny because it is one of those things where, you know, because growing up, you know, like I started. Hero Quest was like the first like miniatures I ever owned, but after that, like Warhammer 40K was like the first miniatures game I ever played, like for a lot of people, basically. Unless you started with like Napoleonics in like the 1870s or whatever, when it was like recent history. So, but you know, you read, like, I was one of those weirdos who always would go to the back of the book and read like the designer notes, or read like the blurbs and White Dwarf, where they explain like why things were done a certain way. And, you know, you get all those people, they would always call out like all the stuff that had inspired them, which was like obscure British shit that we had never seen and couldn't buy in Denmark. But you can sort of get the gist of like, oh, okay, they took like all of this stuff that they liked and they gave shout outs, like, you know, like there's so much like all the stuff that went into 40K has been like covered extensively. But, you know, Dune in 2000 AD and all this stuff. And they got to do shout outs to that. So it was one of those things when I got to do something that became like we're gonna get, got the deal with Modiphius, and we're gonna do a glossy book and all that stuff. Of doing the same thing, of giving those same shout outs back to like the stuff that I grew up on, which is like, a generation or two later, because I was born in 80. So a lot of that stuff had already kind of like, this is like a generational shift of what you're inspired by.
You're born, so you're born in the 80s.
Yeah, I was born in 80s.
Oh, same. So you've done well. You've done well. Oh, okay. You've kept all your hair. I'm the opposite.
Yeah. But it's, so like a lot of those things had already like come and gone. Like Dune, like the book was around, but that was like a thing that your dad had read. Like a lot of that stuff had kind of, and then for our generation, it was more like, like watching Aliens and, stuff like watching Farscape or like 16-bit computer games and stuff like that. It was just like a different, so being able to like go back and call out some of those things, like, and then hopefully like some people will do the same. I don't know what's big in sci-fi now. But
I watched a load of random sci-fi shows, but again, it's like, what is the big thing? Because I've watched what's the Foundation? Foundation's quite good. I've enjoyed watching that. Expanse. Yeah,
really good. Expanse. So somebody's going to come along and they're going to have like those kind of vibes and put that into like the next.
That's really interesting.
So it's kind of cool to get to like be a part of that process and do like the little stupid shout outs. There's like both that and the Leaks book have like little dumb shout out. Like there's like shout outs to like the Doom video games and all kinds of like dumb shit, because you get to, it's like the one thing you get to do when you sit in front of the keyboard and like grind.
And I suppose that kind of like replicates what I do as well. Is like I get to shout out people and talk about things that I like, or and yes, there are sponsor videos, and I know that I find it really interesting, and I kind of get both sides of the argument. But when you do a sponsor video, it is a bit of a minefield sometimes, because for me, I only get sponsored, or I want to be sponsored by things I actually like or want to try or believe in. I mean, granted, I did like a sponsored ad read for this chair here from a company called FlexiSpot. People are like, "Oh, you sold it." I was like, honestly, I just needed a new chair and they're offering one, so I thought I'd do a 90-second integration because I needed a new chair. I hope you guys don't mind me getting a new chair, because that means I can now, like, spend a little bit more on the family at Christmas, if that's okay. But it's weird stuff like that where people get really sort of like, I can't believe that you've done sponsor stuff. You've sold out. That means you're not honest. I'm like, honestly, I'm sponsored by Army Painter because they reached out and they're like, would you like us to sponsor you? I was a bit sort of like, I've used some of your old paints and they're a bit awkward. I mean, what's the new ones like? And they're like, we'll send you some. I was like, and I started using them. I was like, these are really good, actually. I quite like them. Awesome.
You can always tell online when somebody has bought Army Painter like last, because depending on when they bought them, their opinion is either kind of tepid on them, or they're like about them, because the difference was
absolutely.
So big.
I mean, even now, Adam often says to me, "You still use Colour Forge sprays? Is there a reason for that?" I was like, "They're good. They're reliable." And he's like, "Do you not use ours?" I was like, Adam, that sometimes they can be a bit hit and miss. He's like, "Yeah, they can be. We are working on that." I'm like, "I know." I mean, and that's something from my side of it, is like, I've said to him, like, I will use them once they are more consistent in their coverage and like how they act in like certain weather conditions and stuff like that. But until then, I won't draw attention to the types of sprays I use. I'll just say I've sprayed it green or I've sprayed it black, because I understand that it's as part of a sponsorship deal. You shouldn't really be like promoting other products, but at the same time, I'm not going to sell something or promote something I think could be improved or isn't the best it could be, but everything else you're doing is amazing. So just more of that. Like the John Blanche set, for instance. I mean, I've used that recently in a bunch of my videos, because I do like the odd little paint guide and like the talking head videos. I'll come to that in a minute why I've done that. And I'm like, I love the John Blanche set, because they do a couple of things. If anyone's watching this and never seen the Army Painter range, people refer to it as a triad. I mean, that's supposed to be like 3 shades of a paint, but they do it in 6s. So they have like a range of 6 tones from like really dark to really light, and they have like black grays or black. I think it's black grays and like saturated blues, cool blues, warm greens, bright yellows, saturated reds, and stuff like that. And they're really, really nice. But with the John Blanche set, what they've done is they've added a 7th to some of those swatches. So there's like really dark tones. So not only is it like a cool set that you can buy, it's its own thing that's got like grim, dark elements to it, but there's loads of extra colors you can now add to your current range of paints. The only downside is they're so good, they're sold out.
Yep.
I've been doing these videos and like going, these paints are cool.
Yeah. Nobody can.
No one can get them. I'm waiting to make some more now. I'm like, oh, this is awkward.
Yeah. So let me use that as a jump off, actually, because the whole like Blanche vibe, that's like blown up like crazy. Like it was always kind of a thing, but I feel like because there's been so many like nostalgia like revival thing, like that's always a thing. Like the D&D guys are all like going back to like you know, you have the OSR move and all that stuff. There's been a bunch of dudes like bubbling up and talking about like arguing about how you define Oldhammer. And the Blanche like vibe is almost like more now. You see it more than you did at the time.
I think people are, I mean, I've been thinking this a lot as well, like people are craving for that old nostalgia, even if they weren't there. Even myself, like I've done like a couple of painting videos and I've been like, I don't know whether that's like some random fantasy figure. Recently I did a video on Hobday and Hicks are doing like a fantasy game called Warhost, which is based off their Baron's War gaming system, so it uses the same mechanics as Baron's War, but it kind of feels like Baron's War meets Lord of the Rings and it's its own thing. But as I was painting the models, I was just getting so many nostalgia hits from the 80s when I was younger and painting like the elves and stuff, and it just felt really good and really nice, and I was like, I miss the 80s so much. And I think that might be a lot of what's going off, and like with people like think, oh, because like Oldhammer for me is, well, 5th edition, 6th edition Warhammer, and you know, and the ones prior to that. After that, it kind of like becomes a bit more, I don't know, modern and feels a bit too trendy and cool and stuff.
Yeah, for me it was always like 4th, but like 4 and 5 was kind of like, I feel like that was like the continuation, like one long edition almost. But that's definitely like the vibe for sure. Because it was like you have like the really bright colors, like the red spears and all that stuff, and then you kind of have like towards the in 5th, I feel like maybe I'm getting the time wrong, but it feels like you got like the Beastmen armies and stuff like that, where it started getting a little darker, more grim looking, but it was still kind of like contrasting off, you know, like Bretonnian archers with like bright
best
yellow
way
bows. yeah. That's how you can tell the heroes.
And I do think,
but yeah,
I was gonna say as well that a lot of these creators from that era are getting so old now, and unfortunately we've lost quite a few over the last couple of years as well. I mean, like Brian Ansell was last year, and Colin Dixon, you know, and I think there's that kind of like, and John is like quite ill at the moment, but he's still like, you know, he's so stoic in his, I mean, I was talking to I always get his name horribly wrong, Talmus Pirinen, the wartime Trench Crusade man, and he was saying that, you know, he's watching like John do his art and stuff, and he's got like, he can't draw a straight line anymore. So he's had to change his art style, and you know, that must be crushing for the guy like John.
Oh yeah. It's like when you read about like Ratchet and his like last, you know, like just absolutely gutting.
But yeah, it's I think people, and certainly from my point of view, a lot of the people I grew up with as like my hobby heroes are like really old. And it's kind of like,
well, it's,
I'm just gonna pause for 1 second.
I was thinking about that. I was
just to catch up on chat, because I feel like we're kind of moving into topic round 2.
So I probably drifted naturally apart. I do apologize.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's good. It's good. Just let's see, where do we leave off? Lots of inspiration from Peachy, of course. No surprise there. Your video inspired me to paint Frostgrave Warband. Yeah, I mean,
yes,
that is, I feel like a really good process is to start with reading the book and then building your warband and painting it.
Yeah,
because even if you never play it, at least you have painted miniatures. So
you're
good to go.
Yeah.
You have some guys. Also, like I've definitely had games in the past where we were kind of getting ready or talking about if we're going to get into it, and we realized it wasn't any of the armies we liked, so we just skipped.
It's only 8 figures, isn't it? It's like, even if you end up playing it much, it's like 8 figures. It's not like a whole army. So about that.
Yeah. You can always find like some use like an extra wizard for something, you know.
Yeah, the crazy gap between Warhammer content versus non-Warhammer content, but it's closing. I feel all the time.
I do think there is a change in the air, and I think I've backed the right horse for now, by just talking about other cool companies, because not even companies, just other cool products and other cool books and other cool rule systems and models and this, that, and the other. Because I think a lot of people have started to get a bit like, oh, it's another generic Space Marine in blue with a new gun on top of that gun that we know, and I do, and certainly like with the Amazon deal and people thinking it's getting dumbed down and whatever is happening. I'm keeping myself like away from it really, because there's a lot of like conjectures to why this is now changing, why this is happening. It doesn't bother me. I'm just like, cool. As soon as you start making some cool Imperial Guard models again, I'm back. But right now, I'm just going to paint up some war bands for like random games and like D&D and stuff like that. But yes, it is a bit of a disjunction, I think, with and it's a shame as well, because like all these people are doing this free content for workshop and they're like this massive
not gonna agree. But it's also, it becomes this like self perpetuating thing, because people see like you know, you go online and look like you're a kid and you want to kind of get into this miniatures gaming thing. You've seen it a little bit, and you go online and look around, and like all of it is just Warhammer, and that's the only thing anyone talks about. So like, all right, I guess that's like what wargaming is. And then you go into a store and realize that you have to pay like $500 for an army, and then you decide to just.
I was literally going to say, it used to be a really good sort of like, from my point of view, it was a really good beginner journey into wargaming, Warhammer, and the Games Workshop experience. But nowadays, less so, because of how expensive things are, and that's the thing I've been finding really hard to like. And certainly when I was at marketing, I found it really hard to sell that message, which is like, you know, it's a cool game for beginners. And because eventually as you get older, you kind of go, you know what, I might paint some Napoleonics, or I might paint some like ancient Romans or something like that. I found he's doing something different, and you know, it's maybe someone will never do that. Maybe they'll stick to Warhammer or stick to Lord of the Rings or whatever. But for me, it was certainly a journey of wargaming, getting people in, because it's like big robot guys shooting like weird alien guys, and people love that. But nowadays the kits are so complicated, so expensive. Whereas you can, I don't know, grab a Frostgrave warband, and everything from Frostgrave, Stargrave, and even Oathmark are all interchangeable with each other. All the fittings are the same. All the head fittings are the same. All the arm fittings are the same. They're all the same scale. And you could like, absolutely. You know what? For 5 parsecs, I'm going to buy a box of, I don't know, barbarians, and then give them some laser guns from Stargrave, and have like weird techno barbarians, and then maybe I'll use those for 40k. I don't know. I've not decided. But you know, you can do all the cool stuff, and I do think it's kind of lost its way a little bit as to what it's aiming its core demographic at, and most people can't afford it now. You need to be like middle class and, you know, have a really good job.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's funny. A while ago on one of the RPG farms, I was making this post basically defending like, no, like miniatures gaming can be affordable. It's something you can do on like a small budget. And like all the replies were basically people saying like, okay, but Warhammer is not affordable. And that's like what they weren't even like getting from point A to point B, that you don't have to play Warhammer.
Yeah, that's it.
You know, because it's just so like, it's like you don't know. That's a question you can even ask, because
I mean, when I did the Frostgrave video, as a great example, I didn't actually buy any of the Frostgrave kits initially from like North Star military figures. I just ordered like a sprue off eBay of like one of this kind of troop and one of that kind of unit and one of that kind of unit, and it cost me like less than £10 to get like 5 sprues, and that was like what, 30-40 figures across that amount. I was like,
yeah, which is more than you're really going to need for Frostgrave, even if you want a few spares.
It's insane. Yeah, loads of spares. Make them as dead bodies. Nice.
A bag of Victrix is insane. A bag of Victrix miniatures.
Oh, gosh,
so many miniatures. They're so cheap.
Yeah.
So good.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah, Victrix is really good value. A lot of the like War Games Atlantic stuff is really good value.
And their Death Field stuff's really good for 40k, because it's, you can tell they're like going down that angle of like kind of like look like Praetorians. These kind of look like Death Corps Krieg. And
some of them are definitely like
Catachan. What they call reptilian overlords. The Catachans are. Love them.
Yeah,
so good.
The lore catches a lot of viewers, is another comment for Warhammer and its strengths.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it's strong lore, definitely.
Yeah, that was one of the things, because there's almost like 2-3 separate hobbies, because there's like people who play games, and there's people who mostly paint and build, and they might technically play games once in a while, but their main hobby is painting, like, and they overlap with, like, you know, like the model kit guys who, you know, are doing like tank kits and stuff. And you have like the lore dudes who like argue
Yeah.
about like Space Marine, you know, penises on
Oh yes,
YouTube
the
or
chapter
whatever.
penis, of course.
And
Yes, I forgot about that.
that is also a little skill. And some of those like overlap more or less, but they almost like at some point they almost like drift and become like separate hobbies. And you can kind of tell with like different YouTube channels like who they are, which of those they're kind of like fitting into.
You're absolutely bob on, because when I worked in retail, you could tell like who are the players, who are the painters, and who are the lore specialists, because that's yes, they might have painted the odd figure here and there, or they might have played the odd game, but they really were, I'm buying books and reading books, or I'm buying toys and painting toys and lots of paint, or I'm buying stuff but I'm not really painting it, but I'm really basically painting it because I want to play games with it. So that demographic still exists today. I mean, I'd probably say
that's the reason tournaments started having the like
yes, exactly, which used to be broken in so many weird and wonderful ways. But yeah, I mean, I look back now at my sort of hobby, and at times I was like really into gaming, and then times I was really into painting and gaming, and other times where I'm like really into a bit of painting and lore and then a bit of gaming. So sometimes it's like two of one and then a bit of another, but not always the same at the same time. It's really interesting, and depends on the game as well. So certainly, like, let's take 5 Parsecs, you know, it's like really sort of like background, making up my lore, and coming like looking through the book and like, oh, it's kind of like Firefly, but I kind of like do my own kind of cool thing, and I'm going to mix this with it, I'm going to make this warband, and then like, oh, game, I'll play a couple of games, and then it becomes like game and warbands, and then the lore goes to the side for a bit. So
it's interesting because last time I pulled it on Facebook, it was like, I think like a third or so people saying that they use the setting more or less like as it is, like they take it the same way that they take like Warhammer, and you get like a third who are basically just playing like Star Trek or Traveler or whatever, and they're just using the rules, and then the remaining like third or so who will basically like do, you know, they take some parts of it but then they put their own stuff in, you know.
That's it.
So like maybe the raises in the book, but it's also kind of Star Trek or whatever. Like people just kind of like mix it up as the and it's kind of it was because like so much of it, like if you're like at all, you know, sci-fi savvy, you can recognize like where a lot of the things came from, you know, because there's like, you know, bits of Mass Effect and there's bits of Traveler and stuff like that in there. But it's kind of a challenge of doing like, because that was a discussion we had when we were originally talking about doing the book, because it was like, at the time there was no talk of like miniatures existing, so it was like it has to be stuff, most things have to be things you can build with stuff you can actually go and buy. And you know, we left it open to people because I always gamed in 15 millimeter, but we left it open. Like most people assume that it's written for 28. That has never been the case, but that's like the most common, right? But at the same time, throw in a couple of things that you kind of have to go out and like kit bash. Like if you want like a loincloth barbarian with laser rifle, like you can put that in the book, knowing that there's some dude out there who's gonna like, their eyes gonna light up at the opportunity of kit bashing the, you know, Thunder and the laser barbarian or whatever. You know,
I love that guy's name.
Do stuff like that.
Barbarians got a lot of love.
Do like, but you can only do like so much of that before it becomes like too weird. Like, so like in the end, you still have to like, a bunch of them have to be like dudes with rifles because that's like what you can get models for, you know. It doesn't hurt if you have some dudes that you can definitely like use your orcs and all that for.
I think that tactical system, I forget the exact terminology you use, but when you have your hostiles, they have like a different sort of like tactic, like whichever the key is, like cautious, defensive, brutal, or whatever. I thought it was really clever, actually. I really liked that. So although when I was doing my V game, I kind of like were looking at the shock troopers from Alien, like not Alien, from V, like, well, they're kind of cautious but they're also defensive, so maybe I'll just do like merge the two together a little bit or something like that.
Or you could do I mean, you could always like add a roll. One of the things, because there was a lot of like, when you're putting together a game, like every single page of the book, there's like a moment where like it could have been a different decision and there's no good reason it was one or the other. Because like a lot of games will have either like a flow chart you go through, or they'll have like a random roll. So like if you're within closer to enemies, then whatever, roll a d6. And it was kind of a decision early on to just not do that, because I tend to get irritated when I play games if I have to like roll dice, like, you know, for decision points for the enemy, I prefer to just like eyeball it
agreed.
a little bit. But it's always funny because you'll see people who will talk about like, oh, like you can figure out the AI because like you can read how it works, right? So you can like second guess it, and that was kind of intentional because it allows you to put like more bad guys on the table because you can outwit them. And it feels good. But people also get like, I don't know, like offended about it because they like figure out the game and then they're like, oh, like now it's not a challenge anymore. Like, well, you can just put some more dudes on the board.
Absolutely,
Like, that's up to you. Like, you don't have to do the optimal play.
Yeah, weirdly, I found that like, actually when I was doing like I did like a pre-scenario or like a warm-up just to familiarize myself with like some of the rules and stuff. And I was like, I kind of feel that the amount of figures I've got here, like the ones that are recommended, are definitely fun for like if you're doing a story thread and you don't want to like get you guys killed, because I'm not really bothered about some of these guys dying in this scenario. This is about telling a story. But I definitely feel like the threat will be better if there's more. And I don't think, by the way I'm playing right now, that that's going to break the game. Actually, that's going to make it more challenging, which I think will be cool and fun and add that threat level even more to this scenario. So if like at the end of this battle report, like 3 of my characters have been taken out, that would be quite cool actually. And how I go about narrating that after. I've got ideas for how I continue that story and stuff. But yeah, so it does make sense. You can just do that. You can just add in stuff and add more to it. Oh, Agent Smith. Love Agent Smith stuff. I don't know if this is such a weird comment to make, but I'm going to make it. I used to love, when I worked in retail, right, we'd have an upstairs to the shop, and that's where I used to have my lunch. And there's a type of fast food bakery called Greg's in the UK. So you can get like Cornish pasties and like sausage bakes with like baked beans in it and stuff like that. And they're really nice. So it's like a good fast food meal. It's like 80p for a sausage roll, and they're quite, you know, chunky and stuff. But they used to do really nice brownies, and I used to get the brownies. And whenever I hear Adrian or read Adrian Smith's name, I always instantly think of these brownies because I'd be eating them, and because I'm surrounded by all like the high elf boxes and like all the other box art that he did and stuff like that for the old Warhammer boxes. So I'm looking at the art and the elves, and I'm like, this is really good. So whenever I see his name now, I just get a treat of like brownie. That's so weird.
That's like a Pavlovian response.
Greg's is where newbie eats.
Yeah, that's right. Is there any other classic artists that you feel would be really well represented in miniatures? Like I love Frank Frazetta.
Oh, Frank Frazetta.
I grew up.
Yeah,
I think my dad loved Frank Frazetta, so I had Frank Frazetta everywhere. I love Frank Frazetta.
I've got quite a lot actually, because it's the old D&D artists. So you got Gerald Brom or Brom, Clyde Coldwell. Love his art. I think there's is it not Dark Sun? I think it's Dark Sword Designs. Do like a range of miniatures from like the Elmore, the
I feel like the Elmore vibe is like overdue.
Yes,
that like AD&D second edition, like sort of I don't even know what to call it. It's like high adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think Julie Bell and Boris Vallejo will probably be more like heavy metal level kind of figures, like really large scale busts and stuff. But I also recently discovered that Julie Bell used to be a bodybuilder. So a lot of the
there you go.
physiques that she would paint were actual proper physiques that are possible on a like a female's body and stuff. And she used to use herself as reference. And I was like, that's impressive. And there's photos of her when she used to do that. But yeah, Frank Frazetta is both mine and Louise's top artist, I think.
Or you get like what is his name? Who did all the Eldrig of Melnibone art? Michael Whalen. He has this very sort of like ephemeral kind of fey. If you've ever seen like a what's the band called? His art showed up in like 12 different like heavy metal bands, album covers. Now I can't remember. One. Yeah. But he has this very sort of like fey kind of look to his fantasy.
Paul Bonner's a good shout from Jez Hunt, by the way. Paul Bonner is very good.
Yeah. Oh yes, that's like peak, like 90s era too. I feel.
I always like Yoshitaka Amano, but I'm not sure how well his art would translate to miniatures.
What would like?
He did Final Fantasy, like that's his big thing. Like all the classic Final Fantasy art.
Oh yeah.
A lot of watercolor looking stuff.
Work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bron. That's the Dark
Sun. Yeah, he did Dark Sun. Yeah, there's a piece of art which is like my favorite one. Where there's a character. I mean, all the Brom post-apocalyptic stuff's amazing. But her name's Neva, and she's like has like spiky shoulder pads, and she's got like this cloth draped over it, but in certain poses with some of his art, like she's on like the edge of a rock face, like a cliff, and it just looks like wings, like really weird evil wings, but just it's like that kind of stuff. I think she became quite a fan favorite for a time, and you used her in a lot of paintings and stuff. But yeah, I think her name was Neva something. But yeah, she had like this really sort of like scary looking face mask, helmet, kind of full face helmet thing. But yeah, I always remember the wings. But Brom, love that guy.
Not sure who MJ was directing this question at, but interested in all your views on YouTube or other socials you like / people you follow in the hobby. And given Peachy's link with Bad Squiddo, are there cool people you would like to collaborate with?
Oh, I mean, loads of cool. I mean, there's a few I've got in the pipeline, like Ollie from Broadsword Wargaming, him and Kira, and they do their, well, they have like their live stream and they have their own YouTube channel and stuff.
While you're answering that, I'm going to log. I need to switch devices.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'll keep talking. There's Lackey or Zorp, as he's known, who does a lot of Lord of the Rings content as well. I've been meaning to. We had a plan to do something. It's not come to fruition yet, but I need to catch up with him, actually, see how he is. I've not spoken to him since Christmas. But there's loads of people I want to like work with and do stuff with. Most of them I know, weirdly, because of being in the Games Workshop sphere and the lead belt of Nottingham and stuff like that. I mean, Bad Squiddo, she's amazing. In fact, I'm actually going to be talking to her soon. She's a bit busy at the moment because they've been kicked out of their premises. It's a council-related thing that they've only had 28 days to shift, and she's a bit stressed, so I'm going to wait. But for my V-related content, I want to get a load of hamsters. Because if you ever remember V, they eat rodents and rabbits and hamsters. And I'm like, it'd be really cool in one of the scenarios to have like a pen full of hamsters, but then they break loose and cause havoc. So, and she makes models of hamsters. I'm like, it'd be rude not to include Bad Squiddo stuff in this. But yeah, so many cool people. It's hard to, I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, I've either collaborated with him already or want to. I mean, Duncan's always been the one. It's just, he's so busy, I'm so busy. We just never, and we're not that far away from each other. We just never get a chance to connect or make it happen. Lackey, Zop. Yeah, I love that guy. I love the fact I was like, I'm gonna build Edoras on Edoras. I'm like, cool. You do that because you live there. She is a very switched on miniatures lady, and she knows her stuff as well. I sat in one of her seminars where she talks about females in war. It's really interesting because she's obviously done a lot of research, and she recommended a book that I bought for Mrs. Peach because she's really into like history and stuff like that. But it fascinated me because I never heard of some of these like factions. Like I was talking about my Silver Bayonet forces, like, oh, you know, is it a bit weird that I've done like a French lady in charge of my French? She's like, well, that actually existed, and she gives me like reels off all these things. I'm like, I need you by me when I'm doing this kind of shit. Then keep talking. But there's something called the Night Witches, which sounds like it's from Star Wars, but it was a bunch of Luftwaffe pilots. Soviet, I was just like, these are amazing. Well, maybe not at the time, but the name's great.
If you want to get a kick out of something, and this is absolutely a thing that exists that you can Google it afterwards, from the First World War, was the Women's Battalion of Death.
Oh my God.
True story. That was what they were called.
I wonder if, so there's a company that I've talked to Annie about a couple of times, and she's a big fan of. I forget the sculptor's name, but it was for a time it was called Hinterland Miniatures, and he basically did these Death's Head Dragoons and Hussars, which were all female, but they're based off one photo from I can't remember if she's Austrian or Hungarian or something like that, some kind of like princess or like countess like that. But that sounds like it's from the same thing almost. It's like that kind of fits, but they're basically like really posh Victorian clothes, but with Lee Enfields and gas masks. So good. Need more then.
Okay, so I'm going to ask people in chat just to rack up some more questions for the next round after.
If you can like mark them with like a Q or something, it's a little easier to pick them out of the.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say send money to make sure your questions are answered, but we're not that kind of chat.
I have second opinions on
that. Okay, so
I am ready to sell out.
The ups and downs of the modern hobby.
Ooh, yeah, I think interesting. I think the internet has kind of made it a bit of an up and a down at the same time. So let's so
that's kind of like
my
seeded in the question, I think.
Yeah. So my big take is from a painting point of view. And I think and this is why my channel's aimed at like beginner painters. And I know I still do get a lot of comments about like your painting's not very good and this, that, and the other. I know I can paint well. I have painted well in the past, and I've box cover stuff for workshop. I've done a lot of armies for workshop, so I know what my skill set is. But I aim my painting guides now at people like myself, like a parent, or someone that is at uni or at school or has full-time employment. Like, how do I paint this box set in a couple of evenings, as opposed to here's a step-by-step guide on a figure, and it's the most amazing paint job I as a creator have ever done, because I'm really proud of it, and it's a step-by-step guide for you folks at home to watch. It's like, that's cool. You spent all week doing that. You've had 8 hours a day. You've done that for 5 days. They have another 50 in the box, and they don't have a full day of doing that and getting paid for it. So how can we help them a bit more, mate? And I think the internet it has damaged the perception of people's level of what's acceptable as a painting model and what isn't, because you see all these high-end painters, and this is not to throw shade at anyone that does like YouTube videos that paint really well, because their craft is amazing. When like Louise, look at the stuff that she does, and like Duncan stuff, and everyone in between, Richard Gray, I can name off a million names. They're all very talented, all very good, but sometimes I do wonder who they're aiming it at and what is the purpose of some of the paint guys.
Because there's always an element to it. It's like watching a video of a guy who's like making a sword. Like, it's cool to watch like an expert do something. But that's not, because
I know I'll never make a sword, right? But I'm like, like, that looks fun. Maybe if there's an apocalypse, I can rewatch this. Oh damn, there'll be an apocalypse, so I won't get the internet. Bugger. But
it's
I do think there's a misconception.
You have 1 charge left on your iPhone. What do you do?
That's it. Yeah, just try and watch it.
But I do think there is a big gap of like, I don't even know what's it called, like practical painting. You see it with like terrain building as well, which is funny because terrain building is an area where like it really doesn't take that much to get something that is like pretty okay, and will just like, I see people, it's funny because you'll see people on like forums and stuff, and they have obviously spent like so much time painting their army and so much time painting their characters and like highlighting each individual eyebrow hair. And then they're playing on like Coke boxes and Xbox game sleeves for terrain. And it's like, oh my God, like you could spend literally 3 hours on a Sunday and like make your game look 10,000 times better because it looks like shit.
Well, I mean, most of my terrain is actually quite straightforward, and people are like, oh, like, you know, the battle reports I've done so far. I won't be offended if no one that's watching this is never watching. That's not a problem. But most of that terrain is so quickly done, you'll be surprised. Like the V buildings, all apart from like sticking on some printouts that I made, which I have a downloadable PDF on the actual videos as well. So that was just like a load of posters and pictures that I shrunk down. Probably get done for copyright, I don't know, but it's for a piece of terrain. I'm not selling it. But the actual buildings, and this is a lot for a lot of my terrain, is I tend to have like 2 rattle cans, and I tend to spray most of them like an algae mossy green to start off with, and then I dust from an angle. Let's say I want like deserty or sort of sandstone buildings, I spray them with like a beige or like a deserty kind of color. If I want them more like stone, I spray them with a gray color. But you get all that green in the cracks, and all I have to do is just dry brush up. And I've got 3 tones. So I've got 2 sprays that have done a lot of the hard work, and I've got 1 dry brush. And then all I need to do is like, I might pick out a window, or I might just dry brush a bit more blood on the side there, so it looks like, you know, someone's died in the corner or whatever. But a lot of my buildings are so quickly done, and people are like, you should do a video on how you paint your buildings. I was like, you'll be so annoyed by how quickly it's and there's no talent involved.
Because I think a lot of people, especially when you see like really complex like builds and stuff, it's the same thing where it gets like really intimidating, and it holds people off, I think, who totally could do it and who would probably enjoy doing it. Because there's something like really cool about having built something and like you're gaming on it, you know, like it's 100% like your little world that you've created.
But yes, I definitely think the internet has not, certainly YouTube has not helped people feel good about their painting. I think I think it's given a false sense of perception of what's acceptable. People,
I think it's also like a perception of just what's like normal. Because if you go to like
absolutely,
the average like club game, you're gonna see some like grungy looking armies. But that's the thing. I have this thing that I'm like trying to like one day be quoted in the book as the Weasel mantra, but it's that 2 okay looking armies on okay terrain will look great in aggregate, because it's true.
Absolutely.
Like if you rock up, like the only thing you do, because I've seen this so many times when I played tournaments like 1,000 years ago. This is when they still scored for like army compositions. That's how long ago it was. We can't have all those hippies in here now. But you would see people who, it was honestly just like block painting and like maybe a bit of a wash, and that was it. No highlights, no nothing. But they still end up looking okay, because you're playing on like really nice terrain, and the other player has an okay looking army. And you get, like I've seen sometimes in stores, you get somebody who was like spent, you know, a week on their army commander, and then they just have like the sprue Marines like backing them up.
Oh,
it's almost like worse than just spending like less time on that dude and getting, you know.
I mean,
and that's
I think that's.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's it's almost like an education thing. So like when I would do my armies, I would just bash out the rank and file and put a little bit of effort in the character at the end. But there'll all be a certain point. But I remember fondly a lad who came into Games Workshop Derby years ago, and he did a dwarf army, and he was just like, he came up to me and was like, "I got my dwarf army," but he was like obviously sheepishly looking around at the other tables, and I knew some of the other armies on there. There was like a guy who had a Britannian army with no knights, just horses, which used to. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and gave him time to add the knights eventually, but I'll come to him in a minute. But this lad was like, "Oh, I'm a bit ashamed because I've not got." It's not that good. I don't know about Shane and the highlight. I was like, well, pull him out. It doesn't really matter. Are you happy with him? He's like, yeah. I was like, who cares what anyone else thinks? So he got them all out. And because they're all neatly base coated, they looked incredible. So when you're like at arm's length on a gaming table, you didn't need all those highlights. You didn't need all those shades, because it was neat. It was clean. It was just very well done. And I was like, dude, this is the best army I've seen here in weeks. You don't need to know all these techniques. I was like, that guy across you there, when he plays and he starts swapping which ones are Grail Knights and which ones are Questing Knights because they've got no horses, just remind him that he can only use horse stat lines because he has no knights. Until he gets knights, he can't use knights, right? So just remember that. He knows this. He might try and pull a fast one, because he was like, oh, but that's not fair because I've only got, just because I've not got the knights. I was like, just spray the knight silver and bring him in and bloom on the top. No one cares. Why are you making it hard for everyone? No one knows which one's a Grail Knight. It's only you do, and you keep changing what side of the battlefield they're on. Cheeky bugger.
Whenever I play games, I always notice an unpainted army, but I never notice how well painted the other army is, if it is painted.
Yeah,
as long as it's painted, it looks good to me. I'm playing against it. I'm happy.
If it stands out, it's either because it has like a centerpiece that like draws your eye, and they've really put, or that it's just so much above that it's like unreal. And in that case, it's usually like a display case army, like the really hardcore stuff, because you don't want to get scuffed up and scrunched up. And
something to remind everybody, when you watch these videos and you see these amazing figures, maybe it's like a band of like 5 figures and they look amazing and they might win some golden demons. You'll never see them on the gaming table playing games with their models. Ever. Never, ever. Because they spent so many hours painting them, they're never going to pull them out.
Yeah, so, you don't want it to get all mucked up. So, like when I did tournaments, like, there were armies that like look real good, but a lot of it was as much about like making it look cohesive or having like an interesting color scheme to it or things like that, like as much as it was like just raw like brush quality.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that you can't like put all the time and effort, because if it makes you happy to do that, then great, like that could be your hobby. But I hate for it to like be discouraging people who are like, because there's a lot of people who like, I enjoy painting up to this point, and that point is just about tabletop okay. So for me, like spending 3 more weeks on the same army versus getting to just take it to a game and play. Like,
obviously it's painting and people want to put time, and this is one of the arguments for, it's for some people it's a piece of art. It's the pleasure of painting. I remember a comment saying, I spent 4 years painting this Necron army. I know it will never be done. I'm like, Games Workshop's going to hate you. You ain't buying nothing new. But that's their process, that's their journey, and that's what they
but he is getting a lot of value out of that one box
exactly,
that he bought in like $19.99.
May I answer the question from MJ in Oz? Is that all right? because he's throwing in a question, which is Peachy and Ivan, any tips for painting 10mm Vikings, including any different color palettes for different areas? I mean, I've done a few videos on I've done one video on the Hail Caesar, but in the past I've done like batch painting videos and stuff. And I think the best thing I always do with stuff like that is you find the majority color. So if you like look at like the box cover of Vikings or something like that, you squint and you'll be squinting, you're like, well, it's mostly silver. Spray the model silver, then pick out some base colors like, oh, I'm going to give him like some blue tunics and maybe a white shield on this guy and a red shield on that guy, maybe a little bit of wood on the spear. So you pick out a couple of colors and then you wash the whole lot, and then most of the time you put a highlight or a bit of effort into one thing, and that could be dry brushing up the silver armor to look a little bit nicer. It could be making the shields look amazing by putting all decals on it. It could be anything. Excuse me.
If you're looking at like a row of like dudes with shields, like the shields are like what you're going to see anyway.
Yes.
So put your effort there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's where the effort goes, right? I remember Dave Andrews. He was doing a Crimean display because he still has it now. He works for Workshop. He has this company called Great War Miniatures, and the joke of it is they did mostly World War One because it's the Great War, but also they called it Great War Miniatures. So they make all sorts. So they did like the Crimean War and stuff like that. And they used to get a bit of stick going, that's not the Great War. That's not World War One. It's like, no, they're Great War Miniatures. Look. So he was doing a display to show off his range and stuff. And he'd done all these British and Russians for the Crimea. And and I was like, they're amazing. And he was like, they're not. They're base coated. I was like, but they look amazing. It's like, no, it's because I put a bit of effort on their faces, and they've all got flags, and the flags are the things that you're looking at, and the faces are the things you're looking at. You're not looking at anything else. And I was like, oh, you're right. Oh my god, that's just camouflage. That's just visual camouflage. You put all the effort into certain things that draw people's eyes in, which is usually like, and that's why I used to say faces and bases makes models aces. Such a terrible, clunky way of saying it, but it kind of worked.
That's kind of true. I'll just interject in case by different areas. He meant like different parts of Scandinavia, maybe.
Possibly, yeah.
Just because I'm the history nerd, but that's not really a thing. Like, there's not Viking uniforms. Just don't paint them fucking shit brown like they do in movies. Like Vikings like color. If you're like a wealthy warrior, you want to like look good. You want to have like blues and reds and stuff. So give them some color, especially for leaders. They should like look interesting and exciting. But otherwise, like they didn't write this shit down because they couldn't write. So you're good with whatever. And you can use the same Viking dude for like Saxons and stuff.
MJ is an amazing painter, by the way. She does good work, and her tabletops always look amazing. She's really into YouTube, honestly.
You should. We need more people teaching people how to paint armies.
Well, that's like a whole separate one project I'm working on right now. I talked to two friends, and one is going to do like a detail painting guide, and the other is going to do like a like how to churn out an army in like a short time, basically, just to kind of have that up front. Like, it's okay to like get your army painted on the table, and then you can like worry about you can
always add to it, right? You can always add to the model. Yeah. Oh, that was dramatic.
Okay, he says it was actually about the available dyes. So this was like a deep nerd question. There's like certain colors. I think like purple is like super expensive and probably wasn't available. There are like if you look up like clothing historians on YouTube and stuff, there's people. Viking stuff is like kind of rare. But yeah, you can look.
Must be an Osprey book, right? It's got to be an Osprey book somewhere.
100%.
They might look like Christian Bale.
Viking underwear of the 780s or whatever. Like, that's definitely a thing. She says, "Thank you, Dave."
Nice.
One thing I was gonna bring up, sort of to painfully pull the conversation back to the topic, is in a lot of ways, wargaming is kind of, I don't know if wargaming as a whole is a global hobby now. It sort of is, but it's almost more like 200 different like hobbies that are global. It's like Warhammer players, it's like a global community. Frostgrave players, so on. Like they're all, and one thing that often fascinates me, just because I find like human psychology interesting, is when you see like communities on certain things, like they develop an opinion on something, and sometimes that opinion starts like drifting more and more from there is, I think it was, I forget which Games Workshop guy it was who said, like, for whatever edition of 40K, where it was just commonly held as a truth in the community that, like, Chaos Space Marines were garbage. Nobody should play Chaos Space Marines because the codex was shit. And he said, like, that absolutely never impacted on the sales of Chaos Space Marines ever. Like, because that wasn't necessarily the people who were real, like, focused on, like, the tournament meta and, like, the optimal army list and, like, this specific unit is 0.1% like stronger. That was such, like, a small portion of the people. But if you read online, like, it's funny because I remember when, like, 8th edition 40K came out, and I thought it was really cool. There was, like, the 3-way split of, like, I forget what it was called. It was like scenario games, open play, and, like,
the narrative, like, open and competitive, I think it was.
It's like narrative open and the bad one, basically.
The bad
one. But the community was, like, very, because, like, for a long time, community has always online on Reddit and stuff like that is, like, 100% locked in, laser focused on, like, the tournament play and the optimization and all that stuff, the army building. And it's was so interesting because one of the things that, like, it was both interesting in, like, a new direction, but it was also, like, not a new direction, because if you've been around it long enough, like, those are things that are always kind of been there. And the community just kind of pretended that they weren't. Like, everyone just stayed, like, super locked on to, like, the tournament play and the optimization and, like, that one specific mode of play. Even though, like, when you read, like, White Dwarf during the era, even, like, at the time, it was, like, maybe a little more commercialized than, like, in the old days. That's how things go. But it was still, like, kind of the same thing. Like, those games that they were showing, which ostensibly is, like, the real way to play 40K, right? We're still, like, 2 armies, and we maybe make a little story, and we set them up on this terrain because it's on this world or whatever. Like, that's always kind of been the vibe. And the sort of established community, like, interpretation of Warhammer, like, drifted so far from that. And I don't know if that, like, happens. So maybe it's just because it's, like, so big. Because I don't know if it has, like, BattleTech or, you know, stuff like that, or Infinity, or where. It's
quite interesting because I've been talking to a couple of folks, some of the old guard, if you like, of Warhammer about stuff like this. One of the things we've talked about a lot, actually, is the splitting up of, like, the styles of gaming. So, like, the open play, narrative play, match play. A lot of people don't know what open play means, and it's just like, basically get what you want and play games, and that's really hard to manage. Narrative play, other than Jervis Johnson and a couple of other key people in the studio that understood telling stories with miniatures and having fun, it's really hard to write that sometimes as well. And when those people aren't around, people just think it means, like, oh, narrative play is just competition light, right? And then you just go to match play. But it is interesting because match play and or competitive wargaming, if you like, and high-end painting are such small demographics of the hobby as a whole. But yet Workshop always seems to focus, certainly, and I don't think, certainly the other games I've explored haven't, but Workshop certainly has. It focuses a lot of its efforts into match play and high-end painting. Like, they do paint guides, which are high-end painting. It's like there's nothing. And even when I was on Warhammer TV, I found, like, ways to cut corners and stuff. And some of the managers were like, "Oh, that's a bit. We're about quality." I'm like, "Are we trying to teach people to paint the models so they can buy more, or are we just making it really hard for them to paint models and then get a bit annoyed and then never come back?" I mean, you know, what are we trying to do here? And that was always a really interesting sort of conversation to have. But I remember talking to, I won't say his name because I don't want to get him into trouble, but and I don't think I would. But he was saying that in the early days, very early Games Workshop days, there used to be a lot of wargaming tournaments, right? And I don't know if anyone is aware of this, and this was news to me. So wargaming tournaments used to span, like, the ancient, so like ancient Egypt up to, like, the 1500s. So when people would turn up to tournaments, right, they would bring, like, I'm going to bring my Carthaginians. Oh, and you've got your Henry VIII British army, and we're going to fight a game. Like, it was like, that's weird. But they hated the wargaming, the historical wargaming hated fantasy players. But it's like, how is what you're fantasy? So as kind of like a bit of a protest to that, that's why they made Warhammer, wargaming. That's why Warhammer became like not D&D, but wargaming was almost like a protest and reaction to competitive mindsets like that. But the irony is, it's now turned back into that. But I found that really fascinating. That's the early sort of origins of Warhammer was because it was like a sick and tired of these historical wargamers getting uppity about fantasy, but yet the stuff that they're doing is really odd and doesn't make sense anyway.
Like
our own game.
And then of course it came back around because when they did Warhammer, what was called Warhammer Ancient Battles, people did the exact same thing that the ancient gamers have been doing all along, which is my Normans are going to fight your Romans, and it's going to be great because it's all powered by the same system. So it all like comes back around. It's like when I remember when Flames of War tournaments were like getting really big, and they ran into really quickly that like half the players brought German armies, so this isn't going to work. Like you're going to have to,
Oh, it's the German schism of 1939. Oh no!
Like there's a lot of civil wars going on. The one dude brings is like Canadians or whatever.
It's tough though when you try and do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like you got to plan it, especially for historicals where there's supposed to be like some semblance of, like a friend of mine is just getting into World War II gaming. So it's this sort of thing. I was like, well, he wants to build Africa Corps. Like, okay, that's cool. I can do some British for, but they'll have to be like in shorts and stuff for, Desert Rats and all that. And then he's like, well, maybe I want to do like paratroopers. Like, all right, well, in that case, I'll need to do like, so you have to like calibrate it in and like get it to line up.
There's always a way of aligning it. I mean, like the paratroopers would have been at Monte Cassino, and the 8th Army would still be in the desert gear. So you can find a way.
It also depends on like how much you like want to get like fired up about that stuff. Like at some point it's good enough.
I mean, in my World War II games, Captain America is going to turn up with the rest of the Avengers. So
it's going to turn but as long as he's wearing the historically accurate outfit, right?
What was it someone said earlier? It was I was talking to Thomas about Trench Crusader when he was doing the designing of it, and it was some like really weird things like those kind of like weapons wouldn't have existed in World War One, and like and I'm like people getting angry about that. It was like a lot of people were like they'll send the messages saying this kind of gun wouldn't have worked or wasn't available in World War One because we had there's a couple of models with Thompsons.
There's a few things in Trench Crusader that I don't think are. I've noticed.
There's some weird hills that these people are choosing to die on, which I find quite amusing. But Thompson machine gun, you're right, didn't exist in World War One. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure. Maybe it did. I don't know.
1920s.
Yeah.
So it's. I mean, but that's also kind of like you get that even for like fantasy stuff, or like I know some of like people paint up like BattleTech stuff, and they'll paint. This particular mech, but it's not the correct unit that like uses them in the 2,000 novels and make up like all the BattleTech lore, and people will get like bent out of shape about it.
Oh god, I wouldn't know anything about that, so I'll probably ruin people's days when I get to do BattleTech.
BattleTech is lovely. It's one of those games that like literally as long as I've been gaming, there's been BattleTech. There's never not been, and it's always like lurking. I mean, it's doing really well right now. But it's always been like lurking out there, kind of like weird like hardcore dudes pull out their like stacks of like roster sheets and stuff. Those dudes don't fuck around.
No, but one of my patrons, Michael, shout out to Michael. He's a big BattleTech fan. He was like, because I like to do a little bit of research on the game if I can before I do a video on it, as much as I can and get invested. I was like, I know nothing about BattleTech, and he's like, do you like maths? I was like, I hate maths, Michael. I really do. Not really. He was like, you're gonna hate BattleTech then, but I can run you through the rules and talk you through it and this and that. I was like, that'll be great. And do I get to paint giant robot men? He's like, yes. You get to paint
definitely get to do that.
So it'll
you
be
should
really
catch a game with Uncle Adam. Play some Alpha Strike.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's like
I've seen him at Adepticon. So
it's a lighter, funner BattleTech.
Ah, there we are. Lighter and funner.
Solo rules. Yeah.
Sorry, I was wobbling with the camera because I was getting soda supply.
It's fine. Are you wearing a Wolverhampton Wanderers t-shirt, by the way?
I am.
Yes.
Every time I have talked to somebody it's funny because I follow German and English football, and whenever I talk to a German fan, because the clubs I follow are small, they're like so excited they want to like buy me a beer if I ever go to Mainz or whatever. And whenever I talk to a Wolves fan, they're like, "Why are you a fan?"
Why not? It's a cool picture.
Yeah, no, that is literally, it's like the dumbest reason. I don't have any family from England, and I've never been to the area. It is literally just when I was a kid, and they would be like articles about the Premier League in the newspaper. And I always thought as a kid, like Wolverhampton Wanderers, that sounded like the coolest thing. Like they must be like Aragorn. Like that is just, and then, you know, that is all it takes. Like so many years later, when I decided to start watching Premier League, it was like, there's no other choice. And then it turned out that Wolves are going through some things right now.
I mean, I was the same. So in the 80s, my brothers and dad were really into football. I wasn't. Their team was Derby County, and the same league was Wolverhampton Wanderers and Coventry City. And we had sticker collections. We had these sticker collections books, and so you'd get them like from buying your bags of sweets and stuff. And they're like, "What's your favorite team?" And at the time, we had the whichever World Cup it was West Germany versus Argentina, but the kit for West Germany looked like Derby County, and the kit for Argentina looked like Coventry City. And I was like, I'm gonna go with Coventry City because I like the little logo and it was cool. But I also liked Wolverhampton Wanderers because of I really like orange and black. It's got a wolf's head on it. It's got a wolf's head.
No, that's the thing. Like to little like shithead kids, that's like the coolest thing, you know. So. But yes, so I'm a suffering Wolves fan.
Oh, sorry to hear
that. yeah, that's all right. The German teams I watch are doing pretty well, so it levels out.
Good. Well, we haven't had too many questions pop up.
That's fine.
I'll see. Jez Hunt's laying down some lore for dyes and stuff. He works with leather for TV shows and whatnot, so he's got a pretty good knowledge base there.
One of the funny things about like tabletop gaming, like nerd communities, is you get like people from just all walks of life. Coming in, like, you know, you need to like fix your refrigerator. Like ask on a gaming channel, like somebody will know.
Yeah. So many times I'm like, oh, I'm really struggling to listen. Someone reach out like quietly on the email and go, oh, don't worry, I'm a conveyance lawyer or something like that. Like, but you look really cool. You can't be one of those.
All right. So yeah, the one question we got so far is, aside from the one we answered earlier, is do you still get a chance to do any reenactment?
Not for a while. Yeah, not for a while. I was talking to Dave, who got me into War of the Roses reenactment, and he's like, I don't think I'm going to do it again because Dave's really like so soft and cuddly and kind and nice, but when he dons the battle armor, he becomes a monster. He really does. But the only thing I've discovered that defeats Dave is Mother Nature. That's the only thing that can destroy him. Is every time we've done like Bosworth or Tewkesbury, he's either fallen over and got mud in his eye and he can't see, or he's tripped and then like bashed his shoulder and then he obviously has hurt himself. It's like, it's just Mother Nature, mate. That's the bugbearers. But ever since having
I kind of want to imagine that's like how the majority of like foot knights died back in the day.
Yes, exactly.
Get mud in their face.
Yeah, but no, I've not had a chance because kids, and I like him to go at some point, join me. But yeah, at old age, it's kind of hard to like get around and like strap myself up and stuff like that. There's a little bit more limber.
Like squires with that stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I used to be Dave Squire actually, so that's fair. Yeah, I don't think he's going to go again. Might see if he wants to sell his armor. I don't know. Might try and fit into that. But no, I've not in the long term. I wouldn't mind doing some other stuff as well. I might turn up to LARP in steel plate, see how that works out.
Suck that nerds with foam swords. Hembut has a question.
Okay, let's pop it up.
Ooh.
You get all shifty on me. There we go.
Yeah.
What is your feel for what attracts people to a game? The artwork, the rules, the factions, the players.
I think artwork can get people to pick up the book off the shelf.
Agreed. Yeah.
But I've got to be contrary and say that that's probably not what gets you to like buy the game. Like that's like it's like the movie poster. Like there got to be something that draws you in. I don't actually, and I hate to say this because like I make my living writing rules, but I don't think it is often the rules. The rules are like an element of it, but I think, especially for like, I assume this is in the context of like tabletop like miniatures games. I think it's like the vibe. Like games that get people get invested in like Warhammer because it has this like cool, you know, space gothic vibe, and like that got really popular. People get into like Necromunda because like the vibe of like these gangs like fighting each other and scrapping and eating rats and stuff. It doesn't necessarily, like, I probably played like 10,000 games of the original Necromunda. We lived in that game for a long time. But like, I wouldn't say the rules are necessarily fantastic. They're not bad. They're just, like, it almost wouldn't matter if the rules for Necromunda were worse. People would still have played it, I think.
Yeah.
Just because the vibe and the feel of it is so strong. It's the same as, like, just to talk about myself for a second, but like Parsecs, we kind of like underwrote the rules for a lot of stuff. Like a lot of stuff is much simpler than it necessarily needs to be. Both because like it's one person who has to handle everything, so you kind of have to tone down a little. And you will sometimes see people online who are like, they kind of want more. Like gamers always want like more shit in games. But I don't think, even if the rules were like way more tactical, way more involved, wouldn't change. It would change the experience of people who like more tactical stuff, you know. But it's the vibe of like the campaign and stuff. Like that's what makes people like, every single time I see somebody posting that, like, well, I don't know, the rules look kind of simple. And then they play their first campaign turn and they're like, oh my fucking God. Like that's the reaction they go through. Because that's the vibe that gets you. And that's where you start like getting invested in it. And without having some sort of atmosphere or idea, or, you know, it's like you were talking about earlier about painting your own dude. Now you're invested in it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and if it doesn't get you to the point of wanting to do your own dudes, then I think, like the game that always, nobody remembers this game except like Torben in the chat, but Void from iCore, I think the company was called. And it was coming out, it was like after 40K 3rd edition was out and had been out for a while. Warzone 2nd edition had like come and gone. And it was basically just those two games mixed together. If you're not impossibly boring, most people don't remember the Warzone anyway. But it was one of those games where we picked it up because the local store got like really invested in it. They started stocking like all the miniatures stuff. The miniatures were okay. But we looked at the book and it's like, okay, the rules are fine. And then we looked at the army and it's like, okay, these ones are like space Prussians, but like boring. And these ones are robots. And these ones are like army dudes. And these guys are like shit aliens. And there was just none of the armies that either of us wanted to play. Like, yeah. So we played a couple of games just proxying like with our Warhammer shit. And then we didn't play it again because there was just nothing to like draw us in, you know? Yeah. And I don't know that if the rules for Void had been like fucking amazing, if that would have changed the fact that the armies were like boring to us, you know? Yeah.
Someone's mentioned, Jez has mentioned it's about the vibes, and I think for me that's what it is for me. So I mean, let's look at my 3 favorite games at the moment that I'm playing a lot, which is 5 Parsecs. I kind of include Borderlands in that as well because it's and same for Frostgrave, Stargrave. It's like it's not a reskin, but it's like a very similar game mechanic and game system, just guns and lasers instead of swords and shields. So Frostgrave, 5 Parsecs, and Silver Bayonet, right? They're games that really, and for a time I guess Shatterpoint was, but I struggled with that start because of the rules, and I'll come to that. But for me, it's the journey of what I'm getting from that, and some of it is art. So Frostgrave, the art's amazing in that. I really love the art, absolutely incredible, and the way that the book's laid out, and the photography, and the journey of like going through the book and like, so this is how you do a warband. Okay, this is what this is. And then it throws
that's
all
so
those
funny,
extra
really,
bits.
because like when you play through the scenarios, that's also like it is a journey. Like there's like so much that either they were like really lucky, like it randomly worked out that way, or it was like a genius of planning because it all feels like so cohesive.
Yes,
you know?
yeah. And then you take Silver Bayonet, which has like an old tone kind of vibe to it, but the art is all black and white. It's not the same. It's not bright and colourful like rendered art like Frostgrave is. And it's talking about, there's a whole section about, you don't have to know anything about Napoleonics. It's fine, just, and there's all these stat lines, different things, and talks about how you go about doing it, but draws me in with like the tagline, like Napoleonic Gothic horror. I'm like, this is cool. Yeah. But I think from a rules point of view, sometimes it's when I glance at rules and they start to make sense, I know I'm onto a winner, because a lot of the time, like Shatterpoint, as much as I enjoy playing the game, when I first read through the rules, it was a nightmare, and being dyslexic and a little bit all over the place, I was just like, I have no idea what this means. Why do you keep repeating Ahsoka's full title every time in this paragraph? I know she's Ahsoka Tano, or whatever it is, Last Jedi or whatever. I forgot.
Yeah.
Jedi No More. That's it. Jedi No More. Ahsoka Tano. Jedi No More. Yes, I know. Why'd you have to go save it? Retrieve it. And it was just really clunky. And then when one of the I played a game at Rob's. There was a tournament, so I was not prepared for this tournament at all because I didn't know how the rules worked. I was like, Rob, I don't know how the rules work. I was like, I'll pitch against the top player in the world. I was like, okay, cool, that's great, thanks. But he was really good, and he taught me through the rules, and I didn't win, but I learned so much through talking and playing through the game, and then the rules started to make sense, and then I started to enjoy it more. But it was more like the cards that I enjoyed as opposed to the rule book. The rule book was just I'm done with that now. I'm going to read the cards, and I do think the vibe thing is quite true. It's not something you can like pin down, because some games it's like the art, sometimes it's like, oh, that was really well laid out and really enticing,
or like the writing is like really evocative. Like one of the things that I think with like very early Warhammer is that the writing didn't necessarily feel like game writing, because it was kind of like there was a lot of tabletop stuff, started very amateurish. So having a person who like could write in the English language, makes that already gave it like competitive advantage,
I mean, when you start looking through this book and it starts telling you about like basically rolling for your villages and the towns and then start like all the locations around it, I'm like hooked.
Well,
I was like, because I'm a world builder.
Yeah, well, that was a funny thing, because the original version of the game that was like self-published didn't have the whole map section. It was just like moving around and like having random battles, similar to how it is in Parsecs. Like it was a lot closer. And when I was talking to a couple of the like inner circle that I was bouncing ideas off, I don't even remember if it was one of them that came up with the idea of like, we got to do a map. And then it was kind of like in hindsight, the way the map system is like laid out, the secret to it is that you could write all the locations on like a notepad without a map, and it would still work, because the locations don't exist in relation to each other, right? Like they're just places, and it takes one go to go between them. But the map is like absolutely everyone who like pops up, they just got the book, the first thing they do is they start like writing out their map and building this whole thing, and it's such a like powerful thing that I wish I was smart enough to have like figured that out instead of like accidentally getting there, you know what I mean?
Yeah
But it's just something that like so when we're doing the next like Parsecs thing is Planetfall, which would be like a colony building kind of thing. And it'll be really cool. This book is like absolutely enormous. But the really cool thing we came up with is you get to, instead of having an encounter table, there are like combat encounters with like tactical enemies like pirates and stuff. But when you encounter wildlife on the planet, you basically go through and roll it up almost like a D&D monster, and then you get to write that in on your own encounter table. So when you're done playing the game, you will have 10 or however many slots there were encounters that are like specific to your little world. So hopefully it'll be like the same kind of thing. But it was just one of those things that like, if I was smarter than I am, I would have guessed in advance. Like obviously if you give players a way of like investing themselves, that you're not adventuring in my world, you're adventuring in like your little world that you created with cities and all this stuff. Like, it's obvious in hindsight after you do it, right?
I'm terrible at that.
But it's just like I guess to pierce the illusion a little, because sometimes when I read games, I try to like second guess of like how much of this was like planned and how much like worked out that way.
I do like it when you read back like certainly workshop like story threads or like campaign books and stuff like that. People are like, this is clearly what was going to happen. That's what they're intending. Like you had no idea. Most of us were just fudging it.
I
just think there was so much involved in there. It wasn't
right.
None of that was thought about. But no, it's I also, one of the things I've thought quite early on with the 5 Leagues Parsecs books as well, like the color combination, the color coding for like the different chapters. I always thought it was genius. It's such a small thing, but I really like that, because you know where you are. So if I'm like, I really need to get to the rule section, and I just look at the not the spine, but I can just like look at an angle. I'm like, that's blue, cool. I just need to get to that section.
Yeah, that was one of the things they came up with. The same, like, a thing that like surprised me, because like I'm not a visual person. I don't know layout for shit. Was like the book size being just like really handy and convenient. It's one of those little things that make a huge difference to like using it at the table as opposed to it just being like a coffee table book, or
Yeah, absolutely, very handy.
Oh, absolutely. It was funny because when we were originally teasing some of the artwork before they announced what the game was, a bunch of people on like Facebook were asking if it was going to be a Mass Effect game, because like a lot of the parsecs art does kind of like happen. Because they had asked me for like, oh, what's like, give us some examples of like what the vibe is. And I was like, well, it's kind of like this.
Yeah.
So the artist kind of like took that to heart. So
I thought that actually when I was looking through, I was like, oh, I like that.
There's definitely, if you like have played Mass Effect or replayed Mass Effect recently, and you go back through, you'll pick out like.
I didn't realize at first. It was quite recently. I was looking through back because I pick up the book all the time. I mean, I've got like millions of notes inside me, inside the book and stuff like that. But I started to notice the reoccurring characters in the art. At first, I didn't notice that the first few times. And I was like, I really like that. It's so good.
Yeah, we didn't do that for Leagues, because for Leagues, I wanted to be. This may even have been like subconsciously inspired by Rangers of Shadow Deep, because I'm really into this idea that like.
I forgot about Rangers. Like, another great game.
Then the characters will all be like robed and cloaked up and stuff, so that you could imagine them as like any characters you wanted. They could be your characters.
Yes, yeah.
Because I'm trying to like not come out and say like, oh, like, because like art becomes very like representative of like what people imagine. So like if you come out and like the art is like all like white dudes, people are going to start painting their minis all as like white dudes, but there's no reason they have to. It's a fantasy world. They could be like purple dudes or whatever.
Yeah.
So having them all be like, plus it just looked like cool and like grungy. Like I was really into, there's this Swedish role-playing game, Symbaroum. I don't know how it's pronounced. They don't either. But if you look up the art, it's just this amazing art of like characters exploring these like desolate forest locations and stuff, like super atmospheric. And that was like that, but like not exactly that, because we got to do our own thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's a good question there.
Yeah, what do you think? Why do you think there are no large-scale Warhammer fantasy reenactment battles in the UK? Which is a good question.
It is a good question, and I think that is because the IP police will like shut it down. It's as simple as that. I think there's a lot of like rogue ones here and there. I mean, you could argue like Tewkesbury and Bosworth are technically Empire versus Empire because it was that era. But yes, I think there's no other reason other than like the fear of getting a letter from the big man, a cease and desist, and this, that, and the other. But which is sad, really, because it's just fantasy, isn't it? It's just fantasy role play. It's like you're not. I don't know.
I mean, I guess there's LARPers beating each other in the head with swords, but that's it's not really like reenacting, right? But I guess it's also like with reenacting, there's like, as far as I've understood, I've known people who did it, but I've never done it myself. Like it's hooked into like a specific thing, a specific battle, or
Yeah, I guess it does get quite hard after a while. Like how easy it is to make Chaos Armor if you want to be the Chaos faction. How easy is it to make like Beastmen factions and Orc factions? I mean, a couple of really dedicated guys, because cosplays, like in the UK, there's like I forget her name now. She's really, really good at doing cosplay. But they like do like Lumineth outfits and stuff, but they dedicate hours and hours to it, and it's like that's one person that's doing that, and there's like a handful of people. It's hard, it's not easy. But then once you start making a market for it, I guess then people will start buying the gear and whatever. But yeah, it's tricky. Don't know. Can't really answer that solidly. I just think people are scared of getting a letter.
Yeah,
probably.
There's more of a stigma against Warhammer in the UK, though, right? Like, you are more of a nerd if you like Warhammer in the UK than if you like Warhammer in Canada or the States, I think.
I don't guess so. Maybe it's more acceptable.
Like, the average person, like, literally has no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, that's the most... Like, D&D is not really, like, stigmatized anymore. Because now you have, like, Stephen Colbert and stuff like that. But
I think there is a stigma, but weirdly, I think certainly in the last 10 years, it's been less so. Like when I go to pick up my lad, or like I go to school and there's like parents even, and they're like, "What do you do as a job?" And you explain that, "Oh, I paint toy soldiers. Have you heard of Warhammer?" And most people go, "Oh yeah, I know Warhammer." But there's not like a sort of like, "Ugh, you're weird." It tends to be more fascination and intrigue as opposed to disgust and horror, which is great. Which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What gets people like really? I started like lying to people about what I do, because if you try to tell people that you write for a living and you don't follow that up by either saying you're like an investigative journalist or you're writing like a novel about like a crime drama, they will just like eyes glaze over. So just like lines say that you're a heroin addict who collects bottles, they'll be more like respectful about it, because people just have no concept what it means to like write for a living. Like that's not a thing that you can do, right?
No, yeah, don't get it. Early days when I worked in, when I was the army painter manager, I was also the photography manager. I was managing the photography department, which was a nightmare. But sometimes I'd go out with like my mate Steve and Duncan to like Derby, and we'll like out and about drinking, and you'd be chatting to people and stuff. And because they were both single at the time, so they'll be chatting, and then there'll be other people like they'll come up to me and like, "Oh, so what do you do then?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I manage photographers." And they're like, "Oh, what do you photograph?" "Models." And they'll be like, "Oh, can I give you my details?" Like, wrong kind of models.
Yeah.
Sorry. Not that kind.
Yeah.
And then we have a question for Peachy for sure.
Ooh,
Are you still excitedly spinning around because there are so many awesome smaller and indie games?
Yes, it is a nightmare.
There's too many good games.
There's too many, and every time I discover or get around to doing a video on one or a few, 50 more have appeared. So I plan to do this. What I've referred to it as the end of year review. It wasn't really a review. It was just like me like looking at games I've not quite covered yet. So like 5 Leagues, 5 Parsecs are in there. There was like a couple of ones from Modiphius, like I've not Fallout. I think I mentioned the Elder Scrolls one. Just a whole bunch of Oathmark. I not covered that. I not covered Baron's War at the time because I know I'd want to at some point. I'm really excited about talking about them. But as I was doing it, more people were adding more cool games into the comments. And more games. I'm like, oh my god.
Like, well, it's like hanging out with like music nerds. Like once the floodgates open,
that's it. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'll be out of a job. That's for sure.
No, well, it is kind of like it is a golden age in a lot of ways. Like, of just both that the barriers of like self-publishing. Like, if you're even if you're not looking at like going through conventional publishing, like a glossy book and stuff, but if you're just looking to get your stuff out there, like the barrier of entry to that has become like so much smaller. You can get home. I mean, I'm cack-handed at layout, but you can get like sit in front of your own computer and lay out a book that will look as good as stuff we used to pay money for like 30 years ago. And all of that is like just readily available now. You can get miniatures from like literally all over the world. Like I remember he's Jaffa Caking it up. I remember when I got on the internet, so this is like mid-90s, and I would talk to like people in the UK about all these cool minis games they played. And I would go down to the local gaming store and with like a list of like cool games and see if they could order them. And the answer to every one of them would be nope.
Oh,
they were just not available. Fuck off and play Warhammer. Like,
oh, remember those days? Yeah.
Well, it's like whichever like distributor they work with, and a lot of it was like obscure shit anyway that you had to like, know the one guy in the one retail store in like some piss town in Scotland to buy to begin with.
But it was also like you'd get like these like books, sort of like leaflets that would come through, and they'd be like, it'll be quite a chunky catalogue. There'd be lots of cool books in there. And I remember there was like a couple of war history books. There was an artist called, I always ruin his name. It's Don Troiani. He does a lot of Civil War, American Civil War art. It's really good. Really love it. Both me and my dad were like, he was doing Confederates, I was doing like Union. We'll paint them all, do like a little like battle together. And we got this. We ordered this book, but in those days, right, it would be like, right, you need to get like a postal order. So you then pay for the postal order, then you send it off, and then that takes like weeks, and then finally the postal order turns up, and then if you're lucky, and you get the book back. It's not like Amazon like next day delivery. It took months sometimes for these books.
trying to order miniatures from a catalog, and it's literally like hand-drawn like pictures of what the miniatures might look like. And then when they show up in the mail, they are literally just like misshapen. Like I don't remember if I ordered World War II Germans or like Moria orcs because they look the same because they're so poorly cast, you know.
Yeah.
So the fact you can just like roll onto a website now and order like some dudes that some guy in like Poland is sculpting, and you can have them sent to your, you know, like
it's so crazy.
Yeah, so it's like I guess to like round everything like back together. I think like I'm kind of a skeptical guy when it comes to like internet culture. I think it can be like super weird and toxic, and I think there's like a lot of stuff that's like unhealthy about how we like relate to like being known to and interacting with like literally thousands of people. But you know, but at the same time, I think it's like impossible to not say that like for like the hobby as a gamer, that the internet has been like this massive boon of just like things that literally were not possible when like I was you know,
I think it's definitely helped make it more acceptable, made it cooler. There's I think the positives far outweigh the negatives by quite a margin. I think the negatives are like, sorry, shoot.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think one thing that it has done as well is showcase that there's kind of an age range of stuff, because you can get like, yes, like stereotypically Warhammer is like a younger audience, because that's like the entry point, and that's, you know, but you can also go on a blog somewhere, you can find some like old bearded geezers playing like naval games, and you can say like, just because you're old and boring doesn't mean you have to like, I mean maybe those guys are because they're playing naval games, but you know. Like, there is not a age that can't wargame or what, you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
No, I mean, like, getting my lad who was at the time 5 playing Hero Quest. And we made up our own little stupid rules and stuff like that for it. So,
check out Operation Last Train to play with your kid. That was the first game that I played with my daughter that she really liked. She's about 5. It's Joseph McCulloch. It's before Death Ship 1. So the rules are free. He has it on one of his blogs, and it's about rescuing people from bugs. You know, it's like a bug hunt kind of game, and it really appeals to kids, I think, because you're a big hero and you're playing against the system, so you're working together as a team.
That's really cool. I like that teamwork. Yeah, because I always have to die if I'm playing against my lad.
Yeah, I remember the first time I tried to teach my kid. I don't remember how old he was, like 6, 7 or something. I was playing like super simplified, you know, like roll 4 better to hit, 4 better to kill the guy. And we set up, he was super excited. He set up like his little, I think it was like some old plastic Space Marine sets lying around. We set up some terrain, and he was really excited to play. He was excited all day. And the literal first thing that happens is that I roll to hit a guy and he dies, and the kid just breaks down bawling.
Been there. Oh look, there's a special save that brings him back to life. Oh no, all the tears have gone. I see the kind of game I'm playing today. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, this was a little too soon for this particular lesson.
All right, so just about at the end of our time. I just want to say hello to the people who popped in that I didn't get a chance to say hello to. So, Mini Warm Up, hello. VG Morph, hello. There was Jason Ludanto, the legend.
Yeah, I think we had a busier chat this time because we were on Euro time.
Yeah, that's right.
So the time difference means there's only the weirdos who are like 4 a.m. with nothing better to do than listen to us prattle on.
It's pretty late for VJ Morph because he's in Australia.
Oh wow! Yeah.
I don't even know if they have time down there. That's
no,
different.
Middle of the day.
I think it's a day all the time.
I've seen on maps Australia doesn't exist on maps, globes. It's true. It's true facts.
That's fair.
Australians will know this, and New Zealanders will know this as well. They don't exist.
So yeah, do you have any parting remarks before we go?
Me, I've really enjoyed this chat, by the way, so thank you for having me on. It's been nice to put faces to names as well. But yeah, I've got lots to learn from internet related content, but I'm really enjoying looking at games, like new games. I think it's become my new favorite hobby, and there's a couple where people have reached out and said, oh, you need to try this game, and I start reading it. I'm not going to say what they are because I don't upset the creators and stuff like that, but they've not gelled with me. That's all it is. It's like, for me, it's like for this person, maybe it's quite cool, but for me, I'm really struggling to read it, really struggling to build a faction from it and stuff. And again, talking about that vibe earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the games, I've just seen one pop up, which is 1490. I recently got contacted by the creator of that, and he was like, "Oh, have you ever played that game?" Because I randomly like to post on Instagram, because if I see knights and castles, me like a lot. So I click likes when I see knights and castles, and he was like, "Oh, that's really cool. Do you like our stuff?" I was like, "Oh, but a lot of people have mentioned it. Actually, I don't know much about it. I'm still quite new to this." So often I am quite naive, but I think that's also a good thing with a lot of these games. Like, I want to know about them because I've been in this sphere of Warhammer for decades, and it's and equipment, you know, going out into the big like YouTube sphere and like trying out all these other companies and stuff is great. Yes, the vibes are off. You are right, Jez. But yeah, so having these folks reach out, and you know, it was really nice of you as well, Ivan, to when I did I forget which video it was now. Might have been the review one where you jumped into the comments and
yeah.
So that was really nice because a lot of people appreciated seeing like you engaging in those as well, and I appreciate it.
I try to. I don't engage in very much internet stuff just because it ends up being like kind of a drain on like mental energy. So but I thought those were like so like upbeat, like everyone on our Discord was like going off about it. So we have a channel for weasel sightings, which is like if people spot Nordic Weasel like comments or content anywhere, it gets posted there. So people
weasel
like,
sightings.
Yeah.
No.
Back in the old days, it was you know, the hot topic. Because before Ivan was published by Modifius, if you actually saw any kind of blog post or anything, it's like, oh, talk about 5 parsecs. Everyone jump in. Talk about how great it is.
Yeah. That was kind of like a guerrilla movement too.
Love it. No, a lot of my patrons who jump in on the comments and stuff like that really appreciate talking to the creator and like because you respond to their comments and stuff. And I totally get the social drain because I'm trying to be better at balancing it out, but there's so many different social media platforms, and I just get drained after like doing so many. I'm just like, I haven't got the energy.
It was one of those things that was, you know, like from our age, like we kind of grew up with like, or not grew up with the internet. We remember it before it was, but like it's so easy for it to like just become so like integrated in everything you do, and it's like almost you spend more time on that than you do in like anything else in life. And I used to be like all into that, and at some point I just couldn't do it anymore. So I've been trying to like not like I'm a nerd, so I'll always like be wasting time on tech and internet and stuff. Just kind of keep it at arm's length and like
no, but I appreciate it. Knowing now that it was actually, you know, it takes a lot as well. That was super appreciated. So thank you for doing that. That was really, really good. I've just seen this comment. It's good. So yes, the masking tape, mother of all invention, because I had no green stuff during COVID, so I had to find some way of making cloaks for my Tanith. So I used masking tape. Worked really well. But yeah, the cape on the guy, dead easy. The only thing I was going to say, and I'm annoyed with myself for not covering it, but I've never tried it, is doing hoods. So I think I might have to revisit and do a part 2 to masking tape, because I've done a few tabards, but I didn't show how to do a tabard or tabard, as people I often get corrected because I think it's tabard, not tabard. But I did a video age ago on the painting phase where I did some character from Raid Shadow Legends, which weirdly I actually quite like as a game. So when we got sponsored by them, because and I'll tell you this is free knowledge for anyone. The game's free, right? The game's free, and you don't have to play it. Just go to the index, and there's loads of cool color schemes and loads of cool conversion ideas, because you can all the characters in the index. You don't need to like what's the word, earn or collect or find or whatever. They're just all there, and you can just do a 360. And I just think it's such a good resource for like conversion ideas and color scheme combos and stuff like that. So you don't have to even play the game, just download it, and then just like you've got this resource of like cool. So like I get it all the time. And it was when I was doing like some of my Stormcast nights, because I started painting the heraldry and the armor, and I've seen it in War of the Roses and like the Swiss Army of that kind of era, that I've like painted armor with like the Swiss designs on it, or like it'll be quartered. I was like, is that really a thing? And then you see like the stuff on Raid Shadow Legends where they've done that. It's like a little bit more fantasy pushed out. I was like, oh, that's quite nice. I might do that on my but I don't actually get sponsored by them, but I still like promote it.
There's apparently money to be had, so you might as well get cashed in.
It's pronounced tabard or tabard, not tabard.
Yeah. That's nice. What I was saying.
Yeah.
So we have a tradition to wrap up the show. we make a little heart.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can do that.
And
do that.
So, and at some point,
on Evan's phone, the magic is when you pull it apart, hearts come out.
Now it won't work.
Now he's not on his phone, so we lost the
hearts like that.
Oh,
it just explodes. Little hearts go everywhere.
You just gotta have to imagine the hearts.
Yeah, so
you have to imagine the fire.
Okay, so thanks everyone for showing up. Thanks, Peachy.
Thanks
you
so much for joining us. Thanks for everyone in the chat.
It's been great. Loved it. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.